Can we top week 10 of college football? Can we do it? Can we do it? It's week 11. Let's give it a shot. Starting with Tulsa, Memphis, I think are on right now. Who's watching Tulsa and Memphis tonight? Okay, nothing wrong with that. And later tonight, we've got Georgia Southern and Louisiana. And let's not forget MAC in the last two nights. So basically the MAC just plays on Tuesday and Wednesday nights almost. They had, and this is brilliant marketing, 6 MAC games on Tuesday and Wednesday. Basically the entire conference played on Tuesday and Wednesday. They don't play Saturday football. Of course they do, but we get into the season, they start hitting on these Tuesday and Wednesday nights, and I don't know what kind of TV ratings they do, but if you want to watch college football on Tuesday and Wednesday night, you're going to watch MACtion. Eastern Michigan, Akron, 34-28. Close game there. Ohio, Miami, 37-21. Ball State, Toledo. The Mighty Rockets won 28-21. Northern Illinois last night against Western Michigan, a 24-21 game. And a 31-27 game with Buffalo and Central Michigan. And then Kent laid a wallop on Bowling Green, 40-6. UCLA couldn't even have defeated Bowling Green, 40-6. The mighty Golden Flashes outdoing UCLA against the Falcons of Bowling Green, 40-6. UCLA only won that game by 28. Wow. All right, welcome in, everyone. Keep in mind that if you want to really dive in on some Clemson football with the Tigers trying to bounce back against Louisville on Saturday, that we've got a Clemson live show going on right now with the Voice of College Football over on the Clemson Channel. So check that out if you would like to talk Clemson and hear from Jordan Bowman, DeAndre, Smitty, Edward Craven, and the folks over there on the Clemson Channel. We appreciate them not only doing the postgame for us here at the Voice of College Football, but they have taken the initiative to do a preview show every Thursday or Friday night leading into the Clemson weekend. So our Clemson Channel doing good things as well. Speaking of postgame, pick your team. We probably have them covered with postgame shows each and every week. We've got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, Iowa in the Big Ten. If you love the Big 12 and your team's in the Big 12, if it's Texas, Oklahoma, or West Virginia, we got you covered with postgame. Out in the Pac-12, we're a bit thin, but USC and Oregon, the two most popular programs and the two most substantial programs right now, got you covered. The SEC, we've got an LSU postgame. We've got Alabama. That's it for the SEC. How about that? We had Texas A&M and Florida last year. Could not fill those spots this year. And then in the ACC, of course, Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. We also have a Notre Dame show over the weekend, wrapping up the Irish. I saw a post on Twitter that just reminds me. Somebody fairly prominent. I did not know the individual, but once I looked them up, I saw the tweet, didn't know who it was, but saw that they had a big following and then saw their profile and that they've got some kind of broadcasting job, or it may have been a writing job. And they made the comment that that Notre Dame win over Clemson was the program's biggest win since 1993. What? No. It might have been the largest point spread differential against a top 5 team if you just want to use metrics like that. But Notre Dame went to the playoff in 2020. They went there in 2018. They went to the BCS championship game in 2012. So in the past 10 seasons, Notre Dame has been on the doorstep of the national championship 3 times. Therefore, you have to have played bigger games, more substantial, more meaningful games than that game over the weekend to get to a playoff or to get to a national championship game. I'm sure the USC, the Stanford games from those seasons and other games, they were bigger, they were more important. But I saw that it's all a matter of opinion, but that makes no sense to me. I have dropped the link in the chat. You can join us right here at the Voice of College Football. Or you can just listen to me talk about the games coming up this weekend. We can do that. We will drop the link in the chat once more. Our buddy Steve Merrill of Wager Talk drops by every Thursday, and we record a segment with him that turns out to be a number of segments across our Voice of College Football network. So check those out if you're interested in the betting angle. Our guy Steve Merrill from Wager Talk is an incredible 9-1 against the spread in his under the radar selections. 9-1 against the spread. Try to do that. 9-1 against the spread in his under the radar selection. Where can you get that? The only place you can get Steve's under the radar selections, patreon.com, search Mark Rogers TV. Join our Discord and college football community right there. I am leaving the link to the show there in the chat. Little gathering tonight. I usually pay the price when I don't send out the notification hours and hours and hours in advance, either the night before or earlier in the day. So I don't exactly know how that works on your end because I don't receive notifications from anyone. I can't think of anyone. I don't. I've never turned on notifications. I wouldn't even know how. So I'm asking all of you to turn on your notifications, and I don't even know how, and can't really think of any YouTubers that I would turn on notifications for. Not that I don't enjoy a lot of YouTubers. The YouTubers I enjoy, I'm sure nobody here knows, but the YouTubers that I watch, I don't turn on the notifications. I just know to go to, oh yeah, it's been a couple weeks since I've checked out Scotty's Elvis Presley channel, so we're going to get on over there and see what Scotty's got for us. He's one of my favorites. But so I've never turned on the notifications, but I have noticed, and I'm paying the price tonight, that when I send out the notification early in the day, or maybe even the night before, we've got folks in here. I sent it out like 45 minutes ago. We just wrapped up our Miami Live show with Paul from Scoop on the U, the Scoop on the U on YouTube. Paul showed up to fill in for the Wholesome One. So check out that segment with Paul. And I don't want to discourage you from checking out our segment with Paul and really any of our Miami talk, but it's somewhat depressing. It is somewhat depressing to talk about Miami football. Is it not? Mark Edwards making the comment of the night. Thus far, I am a real person, Mark, not a Russian bot. I always thought you were, Mark. You can certainly call the show and clarify that for us. I didn't accuse you in any such way. We got our NC State fan, Droop75's here. Christopher's in the chat as well. Let's go through the schedule. Let's do that. In the meantime, I will drop the link in the live chat one more time. There it is. So we are at week 11. 10th regular season game is played on Saturday or this weekend. Keep this in mind. There's only 12 regular season games, and number 10 is on Saturday. We are near the end. This is the end of college football. It's coming up soon. Now, of course, we got the bowl season. And we, of course, have the bowl season and that college football playoff thing. We've got that as well. Droop75, good to see you. NC State looking much better now that Devin Leary, they've been able to adjust. Jack Chambers filled in. Then they went to MJ Morris, who's been really good. So NC State, I believe, is 7-2. I posted a video the other day that I thought myself, I was interested to kind of size this up. I went through 10 college football playoff contenders that I consider to be either on the bubble or, if circumstances play out a certain way, will be on the bubble. So I didn't want to go through every college football playoff contender. I wanted to go through the one-loss teams that could be on the bubble, whether they're squarely there now and trying to play themselves in, or like an Ohio State, Michigan situation where those two teams, if the season ended today, they're in the playoff, but of course they collide. Therefore, the loser of that game is going to be on the bubble. We looked at USC, UCLA, and Oregon, TCU, Tennessee, Ole Miss. People forget about the Rebels at 8-1. Big date against Alabama coming up in Oxford on Saturday. And, of course, Ohio State, Michigan, the loser of that game. Clemson also in the mix. And North Carolina. North Carolina at 8-1. So we sized up the resumes as they stand today, which don't mean a whole lot because the next 3 weeks, resumes are going to change considerably because most of the most difficult games, like Clemson's most difficult games, are right ahead of them. North Carolina's most difficult games by far, most difficult portion of North Carolina's season is coming in the next 3 weeks. The next 3 weeks and, of course, the ACC championship game, where North Carolina's toughest game to date, Duke. But they've got Wake, NC State, Clemson coming up. Ole Miss, by far, the toughest portion of Ole Miss's schedules upcoming. Ole Miss's best win is Kentucky right now. They've lost to LSU by 4 scores. LSU, yes. Ole Miss's most difficult win, most impressive win, best opponent, Kentucky. But now over the next few weeks, you got Alabama. And then you got Arkansas and Mississippi State. So Oregon is an interesting one to look at as well. And keep in mind that we recorded this afternoon with Eric Scopel from Duck Territory 247 Sports. Get on over to the Oregon channel. We had a great conversation with Eric Scopel, Duck Territory, about Oregon expectations, the matchup against Washington, the year that Dan Lanning has had, the Auburn rumors concerning Dan Lanning. We addressed that. And, of course, Bo Nix. But Oregon, basically, their season has been, in the win column, has been UCLA. That's the big win for Oregon. Other than that, Washington State. But over the next 4 weeks, Oregon is going to play Washington, a 7-2 team. Utah, 7-2. Oregon State, 6-3. And then a Pac-12 championship game against a probable 11-1 team. All right, let's get to it. We do have our guy Ben on the line. Michigan fan Ben. How's it going tonight?
Hey, how's it going, Mark? You know, we're getting close to the end of the season. I could tell that last week when I was talking with you how close we're getting to the end of the season because how chippy we were getting between each other when I was talking with Darrell.
A little chippy, yeah,
a little bit
in a friendly way, friendliness.
We could
friendly kind of way.
Yeah, definitely that. But that rivalry friend kind of banter.
Yep, yeah. So it's going to be even more chippier than that coming up. So wow. Just so people, you folks out there, you will want to hear anytime Ben calls in the next few weeks, it's going to get the stakes are just going up and up and up, and the intensity is just going to be raised to the roof.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we don't win that game, I don't know if I'll be able to call you. I don't know if I'll be able to face you, Mark.
I know that you'll be able to. Come on. You got Michigan fans all over the place.
Yeah, I know.
Ohio State's been beating their brains in, except for last season, of course, for a number of years. And I don't know how long you've been watching. How long have you been here with us?
Oh, I've been watching you probably, I don't know, 4 years, 3 years,
Oh,
at
see,
least
there you
4
go.
years. Probably. I mean, I started watching Steve Dace, and I seen you on Steve's show, and been watching you since then.
We have treated Michigan fans with the utmost respect through all those Ohio State blowouts. Right? Am I right?
Here it comes through all. Here we are already throwing the shade at you, reminding me of all those blowouts. It's
I'm
already
reminding
started.
you and everyone else of how nice we've been here in college football through all that.
Yeah, and we were really nice last year when all your fan base was saying there's no way that Michigan's gonna win, and we took you out. I mean, not that you were saying that, but a lot of your fan base and a lot of the people in the chat, and I was really nice about it when we made that, when we went, and we were all pretty respectful. Most of us Michigan fans on your chat room.
I didn't really get a chance to see people's responses to my Big Ten power rankings. Did you get a chance to see that? Did you see where I ranked Michigan versus Ohio State?
Yes, I've seen. I was the last couple. I've really liked your power rankings. I've agreed with them for the most part. I mean, there's, it's to the point right now when I look at your power rankings, and there's so many teams that they can just move. I mean, they could just flip flop. You have so many teams that's just like making that like.
Oh yeah.
Those there's like 6 teams, in the under the top, 3 or 4 teams, those 6 teams, that like that are in like from 9 to 7 area, like are 9 to, I'm sorry, 9 to 5, ranked 9 to 5 area, you could all just shift around.
Oh yeah.
But I've really, I liked them. I've agreed with them. I didn't agree with I didn't agree with the LSU earlier rankings, and then that LSU proved themselves to be the better team. But I still don't agree where they were, but they proved it on the field now. So
they did. And but I don't think we should give them a pass this week. They go to Arkansas. They're only a 3-point favorite. So
that's interesting. I was just going to ask you about what you thought the more in. So that actually brings up a good scenario, because I was going to ask you if you thought the Alabama Ole Miss game was even going to be impactful as far as the any playoff contention is concerned. And I think that LSU would have to lose to Arkansas for that game to even start to look like it's important.
Or lose to Texas A&M. So I believe LSU they should be 5-1. So they've got 2 more SEC games. They play the typical SEC scrimmage game the week before the Texas A&M game. They've got like whoever they're playing, the Sisters of the Poor, the week before the Texas A&M game. So they only have 2 more SEC games. Yeah, and that's Arkansas and Texas A&M.
And they would have to lose them both for Ole Miss to take their spot in the championship, wouldn't they? Because they have a head-to-head. So if they lose one more in the conference, they're going to be tied with Ole Miss.
Ole Miss has only lost 1 game.
Yeah, they've only lost. Okay, Ole Miss.
LSU's lost 1 game, so they only need LSU to lose 1 game.
Oh, yeah. So they do need LSU to lose 1 game, because then LSU will be 2 loss in the conference, so they won't be a head-to-head tiebreaker anymore. So that could be the potential. So what's nice is that LSU game's before Arkansas, so we'll get to have a little bit. If LSU does lose that game, it'll be a little bit more exciting to watch that Ole Miss Alabama game.
Which Ole Miss is going to be in position, even if they can't get to the SEC championship game, sitting there at 11-1.
Mm-hmm. Which will be and that's going to be an interesting decision for the committee too, if Ole Miss wins out. So what do you call? I don't know if you did this already. I know we slightly talked about it. I know we talked about TCU in Texas probably being the most impactful game of the current college football playoff race. I know obviously if Ohio State or Michigan were to lose, but they're not likely in those games. So what games do you have on the list to watch other than Big Ten?
Exactly. So, discarding some like colossal upset. Obviously, if Indiana beats Ohio State, then that becomes the most impactful game of the weekend. But we don't expect that to happen. So out of what we expect to be competitive games, so TCU Texas, I believe, would be the game that I would watch over any game this weekend. Before I start to kind of scroll through this. At noon, I'm going to watch LSU and Arkansas because I truly believe that Arkansas could pull off an upset that would really shake things up. In the Big Ten Western Division, for those people that aren't hyper focused on the playoff and are interested in the Big Ten championship game, Purdue at Illinois is an extremely important game.
Oh, yeah. Huge
game.
Yep, that sure
So
is.
those are my two games at noon, other than, I'll watch Ohio State and Indiana. But in terms of tracking what's going on in college football across the nation, it's Arkansas, LSU, and it's Purdue, Illinois for me at noon. Those are the games at 3:30.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have who do you have ahead in your college football power rankings currently? I don't remember. Is it Nebraska or Indiana?
Oh, in the Big Ten, I've got Nebraska.
That's what I kind of figured. I was thinking Nebraska was up. Yeah, when you were mentioning Indiana Ohio State game, I was like, I think Michigan would probably be more likely to get upset by Nebraska than Ohio State by Indiana.
Yeah, Nebraska has a level of talent that if they're hitting on all cylinders, and if Casey Thompson plays at quarterback, they're a completely different team with him at quarterback. They scored points. They were, I'm guessing, top 30 to 40 in the nation in total offense when he was on the field. And the last 2 weeks, without Casey Thompson, Nebraska's scored 9 points against Illinois, and they scored 13 points last week. And the quarterback play was terrible.
I didn't catch much of Nebraska. I just checked I didn't look I don't even remember looking at the stats. I just remember looking at the score and thinking, oh, Nebraska is, didn't get, didn't do as good. Actually, I thought Minnesota was going to lose. And I was like, Nebraska, didn't even score over 13 points. I thought maybe Nebraska might pull that one out.
Yeah, they were a 16-point underdog because Casey Thompson was out. And like I say, the other two quarterbacks, Chubba Purdy and Logan Smothers, are not. Yeah, they're not up to the challenge. The 3:30 window is going to be really tough for me to laser in on particular matchups because you got Michigan, Nebraska, but the two that I want to see are Alabama, Ole Miss, and Clemson, Louisville are playing at 3:30. And Iowa and Wisconsin are playing at 3:30.
And that can also have an impact on where the West is going to lie.
Yes. Iowa and Wisconsin, if Purdue can win this game against Illinois, both of them have the tiebreaker on Purdue.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. That's crazy. This year for the West is such a man, it's up for anybody. I think that's fun. It's exciting. I mean, it's like, it's nice when there's contention for it,
I love it. There are 5 teams that can win the West.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, this has been an awesome year for football. I mean, really been great. It's Michigan and Ohio State's right where we want it to be. Coming out to be just it's looking like it's going to turn out to be just another classic game, and then we have a couple things that I've wanted to see and not have Clemson and Alabama in the college football playoffs, either one of those teams, and that looks like it's most likely to happen, unless I'm glad to see that.
And you got your list there.
Yeah, so it's nice, and we don't know. We have true competition to really get into the college football playoffs, and a lot of cases are going to be able to be made, and we'll get to see where the Pac-12 is, or where the big TCUs for the Big 12 could get in for the Big 12, and they've kind of gotten a little bit of a they haven't, I don't think, gotten the credit they deserve. So it's cool to see. I hope they keep winning. It'll be great to see
and
that.
For
how that
college football fans that are interested in the group of 5 situation and who's going to emerge there as the New Year's 6 rep, this is the biggest game of the year thus far in the group of 5. Tulane and UCF.
Yeah.
2 top 25 teams.
That's, what do you think about the ranking of Tulane and UCF as far as?
I always have problems ranking the group of 5 just because go through any year and grab the best teams in group of 5. And there are some exceptions. Cincinnati was an exception last year. UCF has been an exception a couple times. UCF back a decade ago with Blake Bortles at quarterback were an exception. Houston was an exception when they were really good for a few years. But basically, if you take the top teams in the group of 5 and you look at when they played Power 5 teams, decent Power 5 teams. If they're playing Kansas, they're winning that game in a regular Kansas type year. So there's such a disparity that we've seen it where a Coastal Carolina, a Louisiana will go 13-1 or 12-1. Well, 13-1 with a conference championship win and then a bowl win, and they'll finish 17, 18, 19 in the country. And I think that's fair from the standpoint of kind of rewarding them. But if you really look at the results of the games, they don't deserve that. They're not that good. Louisiana, for example, here's just one example. They went 13-1 last year, and they finished 16th or 17th in the country. Their one loss was to Texas. Texas went 5-7, and they beat Louisiana by 20 points.
Yeah.
Those teams really don't belong in the top 25. Now, again, there are exceptions, and maybe Tulane or this UCF team are exceptions, but most of them just kind of earn a spot or are given a spot because their record's so good. Okay. Like somebody mentioned to me, Liberty. Liberty, I don't believe is in the college football playoff rankings. They just beat Arkansas, and they're 8-1. They're 8-1. They're not in the rankings, and their last 3 games of the season are against 3 horrible teams. If they win those games, they're going to be in the rankings. And why? Just because they're 11-1.
That's the one thing. Liberty to me, it seems like, as far as group of 5 teams, I mean, their only loss was a close loss to Wake Forest.
Yes.
I mean, a close loss. It wasn't even a blowout. It was just a close loss. It was a 1-point loss to Wake Forest.
Yeah, it was a 2-point conversion try at the end of the game.
Yeah. That's, you can't get closer to that, and yet you have UFC and Tulane that are both. Well, I mean, UFC is ahead of them. You have Tulane that they have the same record as Tulane as far as wins losses go. And I don't think they have as bad of losses as Tulane did. Let's see, what was Tulane's loss? Yeah, Tulane's a 3-point game to Southern Miss.
Yeah.
Which is not. I mean, I think Wake Forest is obviously a better team. So I would say that Tulane's loss is quite a bit worse. I mean, it's comparably worse.
Yeah, their wins are better.
Yeah.
But yeah, the loss is worse.
And I'm wondering, but when I look at when I look at the way the committee is doing it, I try to look, what do they value? Do they value, wins over teams that you shouldn't beat more than so if you're let's say if you're ranked 10 and you play number 5 team and beat them, do they value that more, or do they or does that play more for you than actually losing to a team that you should lose to? For instance, like Penn State lost to Michigan and lost to Ohio State, and I can't find a clear answer.
So, meaning, are they going to favor the team that beats everyone they're supposed to beat and loses to everybody they're supposed to lose to, versus the team that jumps out and maybe wins a game or two against really, really good teams, but then they also trip up once or twice against marginal teams?
Correct. Okay. And I don't see that being even consistent in the rankings.
Well, in terms of the rankings past number 4, I can't really answer that question either, except to say I think they're pretty good about sticking to resumes unless they're trying to manipulate to help an agenda for a particular team. But when it comes to the 4 that really matter, Ohio State's a great example of them punishing a team for a bad loss. Meaning in 2017 and 18, Ohio State got punished.
Oh, okay. For not this year. Okay. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
But when they had better wins than the team that they were competing against.
But when I look at it and I try to figure, I think probably every year we get a different playoff committee every year. So every year their reasonings can be completely different. So I try not to compare year to year and only go within the year we're in, because if you get another, how many is it? Is it 14, 12 or 14 people that are in the committee?
13.
Okay. Vote. So you have 13 on in the committee, and if you get a different 13 group of 13 people, the decisions are going to differ, and what people value is going to change, just like it would for a jury, or just like it would for any kind of group.
Sure. And our guy here, DDR4256, whatever it says there, whatever his handle is, makes a pretty obvious statement, but it is true. The committee is a bunch of individuals. They don't collectively value anything. However, hang on. So that's a true statement, but it's almost like talking about the American population and various polls that are taken. And if we say the American population values this or doesn't value that, well, obviously not every individual in the country is being counted, number one. Number two, obviously not every individual believes one way or the other, but it's a reflection that most value that. So we can say the committee values this or doesn't value this as much, because collectively they do make a decision. They make a decision collectively. So there can only be one decision made. There can only be one number 1 team, one number 2 team, etc. Regardless of who thinks what in the committee, they have to come up with a consensus 1 through 25.
Yeah. I wish, and one thing would be nice is if they kind of if they put it to a vote, if they kind of just showed where the voting was. That would be something that would be good if they showed that to us.
Yes. If they came out and said Georgia's 1, Ohio State 2, etc. down the line, Georgia received 11 number 1 votes and 2 number 2 votes, and Ohio State received the other 2 Oh, that would be.
And then we could see where things, what that would be great, just to see how it went, and give us a little bit more light. And it doesn't, I don't see how it could hurt the committee to do something like that. I mean, I don't see how it could hurt, but I think I could see it only helping. I mean, why is it so closed doors? not show people why can't it be open like that?
I think that they would have to answer for an outlier, and they don't want to do that. If somebody's got Georgia at 5, they don't want to show the public that.
Got ya. Yeah. I mean, I guess that makes sense. They don't. Yeah. Then they have to answer less questions.
Yeah,
I guess it's probably. I guess. I mean, and it, honestly, I guess that does make sense because there's going to be people yelling no matter what, and it just probably minimizes what you can yell at.
Yeah, there's always going to be some kind of contrarian opinion in the room, and they want to guard against making that public.
And that makes sense. That makes sense.
All right, Ben.
Well, Mark, it was nice talking to you. You have a good night, man.
Thanks for stopping by.
All right, bye.
It's always a nice segue when we go from Michigan fan, and then we've got the Ohio State University represented by the one and only David Greenshield.
OH there, Mark.
IO.
All right. Well, thanks for following up on that one, Mark. It's good to see your scarlet and gray colors come out from time to time. Wanted to give you a call, talk to you a little bit about this week's slate. Just curious, Mark, did you ever think about, I don't know if this would be, if the fans would be into this, but did you ever think about doing any X's and O segments?
We used to do one with an SB Nation guy, Justin DeTavio, used to come on every week and do one.
Oh, I remember that.
Good, and I should bring him back. You do or you don't?
No, I do remember that.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
And it was, I thought it was good. I was just curious. I'm kind of a fan of it. I know some fans get into it more than others. I was just curious.
Well, I'm a fan of it too. I would just want it done well and have it be consistent. And yeah, I haven't given it much thought recently, but that is something I would like to do. Yeah. If you have any good suggestions for me, let me know.
I shall. I'll probably drop it in the chat. Wanted to get to this week's slate. One of the games I found to be most interesting this week, one of the big games this week is LSU against Arkansas. And I was just looking at that line, and are my eyes deceiving me, or is -3.5 seem rather low after LSU's coming off their biggest victory of the year, and Arkansas is kind of floundering right now?
You and me, David. You and me. Although there have been a few spreads like that this year where I thought, what does Vegas know that we don't know?
Yeah.
Why is Wisconsin, having not won a game in the Big Ten other than playing Northwestern, who's Northwestern, a favorite against Purdue, who was playing well at the time?
Yeah.
Why is this Wake Forest Louisville line what it is? And it almost seems uncanny that they're showing us something. From a psychological standpoint, the obvious is trap game. You're coming off the mountaintop, the high of the enormous win in Death Valley, and then you go to Fayetteville for an 11 a.m. start. I guess the weather's supposed to be a little cold by their standards, and spitting rain, and who knows. Yeah, because Arkansas has not been good.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're expecting LSU to fall back after that big win.
Sure.
I don't know, but you know what I found interesting this week, Mark, and I know you're pro chaos, but I keep on thinking about what you're saying if LSU runs the table and wins the SEC, and what that would do to the playoff committee.
I was just checking for this whether that's Fayetteville, North Carolina. Never mind. So your question is about chaos, and
yeah, no, I was thinking about what you were saying because you were talking about it on the Buckeye Show. If LSU runs the table, wins the SEC, number one, they would have to be 2017 Auburn, correct?
I believe so. How do you not include them in the playoff?
Right, but if they then beat an undefeated Georgia, and then you're also left with Tennessee out there.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the real MVP's dream scenario of 3 SEC teams? Is that what we could possibly have there?
You know what the SEC dream scenario is. Let's take it a step further. Not that they would select 4, but it would make it uncomfortable for them to exclude an 11-1 Ole Miss team. You could have 3 11-1. Well, Georgia would be 12-1 and LSU.
Right.
You could have 4 playoff worthy teams.
Yeah. I mean, that would, well, I mean, one would have to be eliminated. And I think the team
Sure.
that would end up, I mean, Ole Miss would have to be on the short end of the stick out of those 4 teams. But I think that, and the interesting thing would be, you know, undefeated Big Ten champion. And what if you have an undefeated TCU in there? That definitely creates chaos.
Yes, to take LSU as a 2-loss champion over Tennessee with only 1 loss, and when they actually played,
and they thumped them in LSU.
Them.
In LSU, that was not.
Yeah.
That wasn't in Knoxville.
Yeah, that's not an Ohio State Penn State comparison where there's a blocked kick with 3 or 4 minutes left in the game in Happy Valley. Yeah. Maybe they leave out the champion. They've left out the champion before in Penn State.
Yeah, I come on, Mark. It's the SEC. Did you ever think in your life you're going to see an SEC champion not make the playoff?
Well, not in exception, not, you know, in favor of other conferences, but still with 2 SEC teams in the field.
Yeah, but LSU will have beaten Alabama, would have beaten by that point Ole Miss and Georgia. Those 3 wins under their belt.
Mm-hmm.
If they run the table,
they would have a 1-point loss to a Florida State team that's going to finish who knows where.
Right,
9-3. They can win their last 3, and then the I'm blanking on LSU's law. Oh, Tennessee. Wow. I want the chaos. As long as it doesn't touch Ohio State, I want the chaos.
Well, I wanted to get there. Have you diagrammed yet a scenario where both teams on November 26th make the playoff?
A reasonable scenario. So the committee's going to have a difficult time with the loser of that game versus a 1-loss TCU Big 12 champion.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a tough call.
Well, I think there's a possibility TCU could still lose 2 games.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, then if they do, then
yeah,
I think that the Ohio State-Michigan loser in a close game goes in over a Big 12 2-loss champion.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, TCU, for all that they've accomplished, let's understand that they've beaten 3 pretty good teams. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, whatever's happened to them the last 2 weeks, I have no idea. But anyway,
right.
Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Kansas, considering, you know, we're counting Kansas at 6-3 as a good team. So they're gonna actually, and this is what's great about the way the season is playing out. Oregon's in the same bucket where teams like that are actually playing more good teams from now to the end of the year than they played the entire season. You know, TCU is going to have to beat Texas, Baylor, and a Big 12 championship game against a team that they've already beaten. So they got to play 3 better teams than the 3 teams that have been their best wins already. And Oregon, the same place.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You know, Oregon's playing Washington, a 7-2 Washington team, a 7-2 Utah team that's probably going to be 8-2 at that point. Then who knows what their record's going to be, but it's 6-3 Oregon State right now on the road, and then a Pac-12 championship game against a possible 11-1 USC UCLA team.
See, that's where I wonder if if you get a 2-loss Big 12, champion, that's got to bring the Pac-12 also back into the fold. If the Pac-12 champion's a 1-loss team.
Sure, it does.
You know,
I don't know what the committee. See, I think the committee made kind of a strange move this week in that it almost seemed as though they were compensating for their number 7 initial ranking of TCU. TCU did not look impressive. They played a 4-5 Texas Tech team. They were losing in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And I have a real exception with the play in this game that just, I don't think many people recognized this play, but I brought it up about 3 times. There was a complete phantom face mask. So Texas Tech's up by 4, 10 minutes left. They have stopped TCU. They just got a sack that has forced a punt inside like the 5 or 10 yard line. So they're going to get the ball at midfield, up 4, 10 minutes left. And I'm not saying TCU would have won the game or would not have won the game, but they call a face mask penalty that was not reviewed, and it was nowhere close to being a face mask. TCU gets to 15 yards. They score the touchdown, and they ride home with the win. My point being that TCU jumps from 7-4 on the heels of that victory.
Right. Well, see, here's what I'm wondering. I mean, first of all, I think TCU's been playing it a little bit close to the vest lately. I mean, they got lucky, against Kansas State, I think, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I just think they're. Do you have, by the way, a feel this week on that game against Texas? I was looking at the over. I like that 65 over in that game. I think that. Well, you know how I love my overs unders,
Yes, you
Mark.
do.
So
yes, it's moved from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, and that's a good one right there.
Yeah.
I think for as talented as the Texas defense is, that they're not an airtight group by any stretch. This is going to be a high-scoring game. Max Duggan's playing well. The Texas receivers against TCU's defensive backs, I think TCU's got a lot of speed in their secondary, but they got a little guys. And I think that Texas is going to, have some mismatches in the secondary. And more than anything, TCU, they've been a very bend but don't break defense in terms of defending the run. And Bijan Robinson might have a field. He's been having a great season.
Yeah.
Yeah, there should be a lot of points in this game.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, and then I was looking at that 3.5 in that LSU game. By the way, I have a feeling Bama bounces back this week. I don't think you're going to have to worry about that 11-1.
Yeah, I don't think so
Ole Miss.
They're
Here's
not
the.
that good.
Is it me or have people been in? I'm no fan of the men from Tuscaloosa, but are people starting to dig the grave of the Saban era? I mean, is it me or is that crazy? I mean, what, 1-year-olds haven't seen Alabama win a national championship, so they freak out?
I don't know how many people have made comments in conversations that I've had this week, various records and streams about Alabama. They're really struggling, and, this is the end of the era and all of this business. And I'm like, they've lost 2 games in crazy hostile environments against really good teams on the last play of the game, both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, I know they've had a number of other close games.
Yes,
we all know that. But, I mean, they had a number of close games last year, and they were 1 quarter away from winning the national championship.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that, he's probably missed on a couple of hires, maybe on his staff, that are hurting him. And he normally replaces his coordinators very well over the years, which I think is one of the biggest reasons he's obviously been able to keep things rolling as strong as he has. And I think that seems to be the real maybe issue there, is that he's probably going to have some staff changes, and for their sake, the better, hopefully for the better for them.
Yeah, no, people down there aren't real happy with Bill O'Brien.
Yeah. Yeah, they've had it out for him for a while.
Yeah.
One last thought. I was just on the Buckeyes going forward. The only positive I took from last week's game is that they finally used Stroud's legs. We discovered he has legs, because I think that, especially if the teams are going to load the box, they're going to have to do some things to equate those numbers. Day talked about it after the game. I think, bottom line, I think they need to have both running backs, and I think they need to incorporate some zone read. I don't think they need to go back to the Braxton Miller, JT Barrett days, but 4 or 5 carries a game would not be ridiculous going forward.
Stop me if you've already heard this, David, because I've said it a couple times this week. I don't know if you were along, But the three things that hit me during that game concerning the running game,
Yeah.
one was when they scored the first touchdown with Emeka Egbuka. I thought,
Yeah.
not that playing an exotic, calling an exotic end around play is, it is unique to Ohio State. But it just struck me as, wonder if they're going to get other players involved, wide receivers, meaning in the running game, to try to create just other rushing yardage from other spots, not traditional running attack. Number two, to play off of what you're talking about, how many times, it seemed like 8 times, it was probably 3 or 4, did they keep slamming their head against the wall on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1? It was ridiculous. And then when Stroud pulled it in what was probably, the 3rd quarter, and just, it fooled everybody in the world. Is that the first time that they've called a designed quarterback run this season?
I haven't seen many. I know they haven't run that zone read for a while.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, they weren't running it much in the Justin Fields days. Although it seemed like Stroud had basically become Haskins back there and pretty much wanted to just be a statue and throw the ball. But I mean, he's got some good wheels. I mean, he's not a great runner, but I mean,
Sure.
all I'm saying is 4 or 5 zone read plays a game just to keep the defense honest would definitely help. And you're absolutely right. They should run more of those jet sweeps. They used to run those pop passes with Paris Campbell, in 2018, and those things work like a charm. I don't see why they couldn't still run those with Egbuka.
So my thought on Stroud, so they ran the 4th and 1, and he gained the first down. Then they ran another one on their final touchdown drive where he picked up 25, 30 yards.
Yeah.
And I thought, was Ryan Day waiting for Michigan? Was he holding these plays for the Michigan game, and he is that concerned about this game that he called them early? Or is he trying to put this on tape late in the season for Michigan to have to prepare and waste time and prepare for CJ Stroud as a runner?
I think that does get overplayed a little bit, Mark. That holding back plays. To a certain extent, I think that theme, and that's been put out there for a long time, does get overplayed. That's the one thing I do agree when coaches say to the media. They say some things that are whatever, but when they say that we're coaching to win this game and doing whatever it takes, that much is I agree with. Well, as always, it's a pleasure to talk college football with the great Mark Rogers. We'll get back together. Will you have another show tomorrow or Saturday?
Yeah, I think we're going to lead into the USC Colorado game. That should be a scintillating affair.
Indeed, it will. You have a good one, Mark. You take care of yourself, my friend.
Thanks, David, I appreciate it. All right. Somebody, D. Brown, what am I needing to stop on? What did I say that offended you? What was that about? Anyway, got Charles from Michigan on. Hey, Charles.
Go Blue, man.
What's going on?
I'm 63 days sober.
That is phenomenal.
That's great. But do you think we really have a chance in Columbus? I see us winning by like 6 field goals or something.
Heck yeah.
I know the running game's good, but I'm concerned about the passing game. I know that JJ's. I mean, we can hit the tight ends, but the wide receivers, they seem to be off. Yeah, the passing game isn't. And I haven't watched much.
In all center. Yeah.
I haven't watched enough of Ohio State. I don't know what their Achilles heel is, but is it their secondary or?
Well, on defense it is, but their front seven has played so well that their secondary hasn't mattered too much. Yeah, their secondary's played okay. It's been worse in recent years. I would say that they're playing better this year than the last 2 years, but not much better. It's still not a strong secondary. Their defensive line and their linebacker play is so much better than it's been. And their defensive line's playing really well. They're playing really good as a defensive unit. They're in the top 10 in the nation in just about everything.
Yeah, I'm really happy with our defense this year. I mean, like, it's not been one person. It's been like the whole defense that have made plays when it's mattered,
And that is sometimes better than having
a no-star
superstars.
defense.
Yeah.
Right. And I have one last question. So if Michigan loses to Ohio State, do they go to the Rose Bowl then?
Yes. Well, not
And they play a
technically, it
Pac-12
doesn't
team?
have to happen, but that's going to be the selection. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you.
Charles, thank you so much for being here.
Yep. Thank you so much.
It's our guy, Charles, and our Michigan folks showing up tonight. We've had 3 calls, 1 Ohio State, 2 Michigan. That should get Buckeye fans ready to go. And yes, Gregory, the 10-minute war revisited. One Scoop John, appreciate you being here. Yes, congratulations, Charles. 63 days sober. So for anyone who has battled that or battled anything in your life that took a lot of determination and discipline and so much more, and help and support, hopefully from others, that's amazing. That's amazing. You know, I hope this is not a frivolous way to relate to that, but I have a horrible sweet tooth. And I've, for most of my life, I didn't care. I didn't gain weight. I felt great. And it just didn't impact me. Now, in the last 10 or 15 years, yeah, I guess I could stand to lose 10 pounds. And, I could be in better shape, that's for sure. My workouts have not been what they should be. And, but I think the older you get, the more important it is that you eat right. The exercise is extremely important and always will be, but eating properly is even more, from what I understand and what I hear from across the board, that eating right is 80% of the equation and the exercise is like 20. And I tell you, to try to discipline myself to eat right, like I'll sometimes think that I've done really well in not eating junk food, and it seems like it's been a month. And when I think about it, I'll be like, oh, it's Thursday night and it's only been since Wednesday afternoon since I've had, like right now, it doesn't seem like I've had any junk food recently, and it's Thursday night. Doesn't seem like it's been, I didn't have any today, but you know what? I had a chocolate shake yesterday. I shared this with somebody the other day because we talked about this on our Iowa live stream last week. We started talking about food, and I had just brought home a sub, and I swung by the store and I had to get a few things. And I also picked up the party size of Chips Ahoy. And I later counted these, not that you have to count them. You just look at the label on the back. It tells you how many cookies are in the pack. It only took me less than 2 days to knock off 66 cookies in the Chips Ahoy. So for somebody to show that kind of determination and resolve, man, that's phenomenal. All right. Mark says that keto kills the urges, Mark. The problem with that, from what I understand, and I've got some really close friends that have been on keto. I can think of two of my best friends have been on keto, that if you drop off the wagon, then your body has been so conditioned that, and fortunately, I still don't really gain weight. Although you only have to gain, think about this, if you're 50 years old and you've been out of high school for 30 years, gain 1 pound a year. That's not that much. 1 pound through a whole year, but you're 30 pounds heavier, right? And I'm about 20 to 22 pounds heavier. I weighed in at the doctor's. I went to the doctor for the first time in 3 years couple of weeks ago, and I was at 182. I was around 162 30 years ago. All right, nobody else cares about that. Chris, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine. How are
Oh,
you?
I'm doing okay. It's kind of interested to hear what you were talking about. It's stuff I can kind of relate to. I don't budget myself, and I'm overweight and everything else, but I don't want to get into that. That's kind of a personal thing. But when I worked at a grocery store at one point, and just the nature of the job itself, there was some things that had me busy doing that as a result of working there, I lost a lot of weight.
Okay. So that was a good thing for you.
Oh, sure. But I'm 54, and that was when I was like 24. So that's about 30 years ago.
That's interesting because, like you, Chris, I worked at a grocery store in high school and college, and I was hustling. You know, I was a hard worker. I enjoyed that job. I enjoyed stocking shelves. But anyway, but I ate a lot at the grocery store. Like my bosses allowed me to eat whatever I wanted. So that was not a good thing.
Are you Kurt Warner in disguise?
No, I'm not going to break out and become an NFL Hall of Famer. No.
You never know.
No. Not quite.
I can't remember exactly what I was going to ask you. There was one thing I just want to share with you, and it might not interest you, Mark, and if it doesn't, just cut me off or do whatever you want to do. It's your show, and I don't want to interrupt you, but it kind of came up in the chat, and I think it's kind of relevant, and you might not agree with me, but in 1983, and it'll be something that'll probably upset you a little bit because it kind of ties in a little bit with what I think about the sport, but in 1983, USC, I think, tied, I think it was. Can't remember exactly. I'd have to go back and check it, but I think they tied like Florida or somebody. But anyway, they ended up losing to Kansas. And I don't know that Kansas is all that great, but they did lose to Kansas. And I think Kansas ended up getting beat by Iowa State.
Okay.
And you'll see where I'm going with this pretty fast.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're working the belt on me here.
Yeah, well, a version of it. Anyway, New Mexico State was the team that beat Iowa State. And so, I think the team that New Mexico State ended up losing to was Tulsa. And Tulsa, I think, finished from that point on, moving forward, obviously. If I took it backward, it wouldn't work this way. But moving forward from that point after they beat New Mexico State, Tulsa actually, the next team they lost to was Brigham Young in the 1984 season. And I just thought I'd share that with you because it might be a little contrived. But it's really not something that I made up, though. I mean, it shows that maybe just for that period of time in history, I think there was a greater, what do you want to call it? I guess parity, maybe. And I mean, it might be a plug for like New Mexico State. I don't know. But, for them to beat Iowa State, I mean, I think that's a pretty big deal. And I think it was in Iowa State. I could be wrong about that. But, and we're not going to like spend a lot of time probably on a team like New Mexico State. But, they're not too bad this year. I think they're I don't think they have a winning record, but with Jerry Kill, I think they have Jerry Kill there as their coach. He did all right. I thought he was a pretty good coach for, was it Minnesota?
Yeah, he was really good there.
I thought he did all right. Yeah. And I think New Mexico State, they can be competitive. I mean, that's not usually how they are, but I just wondered what you thought about that. The way that I guess some of the independents are playing at this point. I think they're actually playing pretty well.
I'm intrigued by the list of independents at this point because, Christopher, of course, you are a historian of the sport, and you enjoy the history, and you well know that if this were 30 years ago, there were all sorts of independents, Penn State and Syracuse and South Carolina, sure. Louisville. We could go on and on.
Millions of them.
Yes, just tons of independents. Now we have a situation where we've got one independent in Notre Dame that is kind of its own entity from a standpoint of being able to schedule whom they want and being a major TV draw and all of that. Then you've got BYU, and they certainly are a thriving football product as well. They've decided, of course, to join the Big 12. Mm-hmm. And then the rest of these independents, Liberty and UMass, and there's only a couple left. There's only a few left. I just wonder about where they are, especially a program like UMass. Like, what are they trying to get out of football? They're not in a conference. They can't win a conference title. They don't have conference affiliation to gain that money. that revenue. They don't have rivalries within a conference. Like, what are they? They're just kind of aimlessly out there.
hmm
It's just kind of odd to me.
Oh, I couldn't tell you that part, but was it that Arizona defensive? Did he ever go there? I can't remember for sure. I thought he was headed that way. Wasn't that
Arizona.
Oh, he was like he was like at Michigan and he went to Arizona, and I think they said they were gonna. I thought he was to be the head coach there at
Oh, Rich
Massachusetts.
Rodriguez.
No.
Oh,
Anyway, I don't know. I don't think he ever went there, but that he was slated to be Massachusetts coach. I think this last season. He was like
look that up.
he used to run the blitz all the time. I think he was kind of known for doing that, and then he was.
Well,
You know what I'm talking about?
I'm sure I know who you're talking about, but I'm going to have to
Yeah, I don't remember either, but
look him up. Oh, Don Brown. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I forgot about that. Yes, Don Brown. Thank you.
but is he there? I mean, I guess.
Yes, he is there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I
Yes,
didn't
he
know that.
is.
Yeah. Well, in other words, I kind of see that there's kind of I don't know if it's just this season, but kind of a movement from the independents. They're actually doing pretty good, I think, except for Massachusetts, but maybe they might improve too. Brigham Young isn't very good, but the other ones seem to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, compared to what they've been in the past. I also find it interesting that New Mexico State is an independent. Of course, New Mexico is in the Mountain West Conference. And of course, they play each season as they should.
Yeah, I think New Mexico got beat by them, didn't they? I think New Mexico
I don't
State
know.
beat
I have
them.
to look.
Yeah, I think they did.
So then the other thing that I find interesting is once some of these teams became independents just recently, they were needing to play games, or they were needing to find opponents, and there were a few years where they actually played 2 games against each other.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's kind of strange.
I think Idaho was, or was Idaho? I think Idaho might have been an independent at one point too.
Yeah.
They dropped down to, and I think Connecticut came back up here a couple of years ago, and I think they're an independent, but I think they're still affiliated with the Big East Conference, aren't they?
In
Connecticut.
basketball. Yeah, I'm sure they are,
No, I think they're a member of the Big East Conference, aren't they?
but not in football.
No, I think they are in football too. I think.
They just haven't started.
Oh, I don't know. I just thought that I was under the assumption that Connecticut was part of the Big East.
Well, there is no Big East football conference.
Oh, well, maybe that's where I'm confused. I just was under the assumption they were still in the Big East.
Well, they were in the American Conference.
Yeah, well, that's why I was confused, because I would have thought that with them not being in the Big East that they'd be part of the American Conference right now. That's what's kind of confusing to me about it.
Yeah. See, they're another school that I just kind of question. I'm just curious as to what they are trying to achieve, besides obviously fielding a football team for a matter of prestige for the university, number one, to draw attention. And then also, I guess they would make money. I would think it would be difficult to negotiate television rights being an independent at that stature.
Uh-huh.
Like, they play on CBS Sportsnet coming up this week. I'm sure that's where they played most of those games this season.
Uh-huh.
If they were on television at all.
Well, like I said, I thought part of the reason they dropped down to FCS was so that they could play in the Big East. That's why I'm still a little bit confused about it. Maybe I'm wrong about the whole thing, but I was just under the assumption that they were in the Big East Conference. They're not. That's what I thought they were.
They're an independent right now.
Yeah, well, I know in FBS, but I'm just saying, as far as their affiliation, though, aren't they part of the Big East Conference still? Am I wrong about that?
As a basketball team.
Well, I thought they were a fully participating member, though. I don't know. Don't ask me, Mark. I don't know.
No, the independent list is Liberty, Notre Dame, UConn, BYU, New Mexico State, Army, and UMass.
Uh-huh. So they're an independent then?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they're not bad, though. I think they're a lot better than they were.
Yeah, with Jim Mora, they sure are.
Yeah, they're not bad. You don't think they should be in FBS?
No, I'm fine with them being in the FBS. I'm just curious. I'm not criticizing. I'm just curious about these schools that aren't Notre Dame that are trying to make it as independents and just how much money they're making, since they don't necessarily have, of course, they have TV contracts. They have to sign a contract to play on TV, but they don't have a set TV contract affiliated with a conference. They don't draw well. Like, it's just an odd. Like, UMass played UConn this past weekend. I can't imagine how many people showed up at that game. Let's see here. Apparently, there were 23,000 people there.
Well, no, I kind of know what you're trying to tell me, but I think like a year or two ago, that was like, I think they were both winless, and so like the team that won was like, I can't remember which team it was, but yeah, but I don't think it's, I know Massachusetts isn't very good really, but I think Connecticut's not terrible. They're not that bad. I mean, they're not that good either. Don't get me wrong, but I kind of had the impression that they're quite a bit better than they were.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, from last season.
Yeah.
I know none of them really do all that great. I'm kind of surprised Liberty's doing as well as they are. I think it's probably a lot harder to really do well as an independent. I don't think you get the national exposure maybe? Is that probably, and that's the other question I have about it. Does Notre Dame, by being maybe they're not, I know that in football they're independent, but by being in the ACC, does that kind of elevate their status a little bit?
I don't believe that joining the ACC or coming under contract more accurately with the ACC has helped Notre Dame's status.
You don't?
I don't think their status needs helped much at all. They're Notre Dame, but actually what has happened is it has weakened their schedule, for one thing, playing the likes of Duke and Georgia Tech 5 times a year.
Well, the ACC is mostly known for basketball, right?
Yeah, it is.
Isn't that kind of what they're known for?
Yep, it is.
Not as much football, I guess. What about Connecticut in the ACC? What do you think of that?
I don't know what they really bring to the ACC. I don't know why the ACC would add Connecticut. They would add them for basketball. But
that's what I meant.
That would be the motivation. But
yeah, that's what I was trying to.
Standpoint,
they're not in the ACC though.
Yeah, I don't know from a football standpoint what they would possibly gain from that.
I was just curious what you thought of that for like maybe a potential expansion.
Well, I would, I do think it's odd and kind of strange that these independents are out there just kind of by themselves. So I think it's kind of peculiar. So it's kind of intriguing to me. It's similar to with the 4 teams joining the Big 12 next year. I got my wish. I asked for this months and months ago, that I said, I hope that there's not a clean break with Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 and then the 4 schools, Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF joining. I want them all to be together playing each other. So we get our wish this next season and maybe in 24 as well for 2 seasons.
I have a question about that, if you don't mind me. I know I'm kind of taking a lot of your time, but I think I read somewhere that the Big 12 just completed negotiations, or at least they're in the middle of them and I thought I got the impression that at least for the teams that they have in there now, I think they're going to get a pretty good television contract. And maybe it doesn't matter now, but is that based on the present, or is it based, because I know after Texas and Oklahoma are gone, how could, that's got to take a toll, I think, on what they're going to stand to earn, won't it, in terms of the potential income?
Well, absolutely it is. Yeah, they are not worth as much money with those 2, minus those 2, even adding the other 4. But yeah, let's see. They renewed, as you mentioned here, I'm looking at the exact numbers because, I was aware that they just signed this contract about 2 weeks ago, and it was yes, as you just mentioned, it was considered to be a pretty lucrative contract compared to what they were expected to get. $2.2 billion for a 6-year extension.
I guess the question I might have, Mark, would that maybe, I don't know, is it set in stone that those teams are leaving? Would this maybe change maybe what they might do, or is that already been, they're leaving is set in stone sort of thing? Is that they're gone no matter what?
Well, that's a great question because let's say, and as soon as I mention this, I'm sure all sorts of people are going to jump on this in the chat. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if Texas or Oklahoma or both would decide, let's go back to the Big 12, I would think that they have signed contracts with the SEC, and they would have to pay some kind of penalty.
Oh, I see. Well, but they're not part of the SEC, though.
Well, no, they're not. They won't be official members until July of 25.
Well, I guess my question would be, unless they're actually in the SEC, how does that penalty apply if they're not already there?
Yeah, maybe if they've signed contracts, they're still not.
Well, I remember, it's been some time ago, but I remember the Big East was going to expand, and they were I think they were looking at Texas Christian, San Diego State, and I can't remember who else, maybe Boise State. I really don't remember, but, and then I think the Big 12 came along and they took Texas Christian, and then I think it just ended whatever it was that the Big East was trying to do at the time, the American, I guess now. Anyway, whatever it was that they were trying to get done, it didn't happen. And I don't know that there was any penalty. I could be wrong. Maybe there was. I don't know if Texas Christian had to pay a penalty to the Big East for not going there. I know that they were looking to expand outside they were going to expand and include those teams. Yeah, and I don't think they did because they stayed where they were. San Diego State was one of them. And I think it was Boise State, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Conference USA.
Yeah, they were looking to leave.
Yeah,
but I don't know that they had to pay a penalty not to leave, did they?
No, because it never. Yeah,
that's kind of what I was curious about.
Well, in this case, all our conjecture is kind of fantasy land because Oklahoma and Texas, I cannot imagine, are going to turn down the SEC and go back to the Big 12. The financial windfall is considerably different.
Isn't there kind of a diminished return, though, by joining this is what I was trying to explain to you once before, I think. When you add teams, I think that diminishes the revenue that you can spend.
Yeah, it does.
You share it between more teams, and so I think it cuts into your profits, doesn't it?
Yeah, but think about this. The Big 12 has just added 4 teams. So they're going to divide, if somebody can do the math, 6 years, $2.2 billion. What's that? That's about close to $400 million per team.
Okay. Per over 6 years, though, right?
Put 14 into that. Yeah.
60 million maybe per team, roughly.
Per year. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess.
The Big Ten's supposed to be in the 95 range.
Oh, I see. So we're talking about a substantial difference, I guess.
Yeah.
So there is an advantage to leaving then, I guess.
Oh, yeah. That's why they joined the SEC.
All right. That's about all I have to tell you. Right. So
yeah. Thanks for stopping by.
Appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
We had somebody on hold and somebody ready to join, and they dropped off, unfortunately. But we appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. We will certainly continue to run through Week 11. Week 11, as we also look at the point spread. So we ran through the 3:30 games. I am going to be, it's going to be a tough call for me, but Alabama, Ole Miss, and I really am interested to watch Wisconsin, Iowa. Those are my first 2 selections. Louisville, I believe, will give Clemson a game in Death Valley. Maryland, Penn State really is a meaningless game, but should be an entertaining game. And then again, Group of 5 fans, UCF and Tulane. If you're going to watch a Group of 5 game almost any time this season, that's the one to watch. Unfortunately for those 2 teams, and bringing attention to that level of play, there are way too many quality Power 5 games. And then we go to Primetime. We do see South Carolina taking on Florida. This was regarded as a possible upset during the offseason. Georgia going to Mississippi State to deal with Will Rogers and Mike Leach and company. But Washington, Oregon, huge game in the Pac-12. Kansas State, Baylor. Kansas State. Both of those teams, they're both 4-2, I believe is the record. Yes, 4-2 in the conference. So the winner, you have a log jam of 2 lost teams in conference play in the Big 12 that are vying for that other spot opposite TCU, and that's a big game, Kansas State Baylor, to get to the Big 12 championship game. I know a lot of these games that I mention as big games, a lot of people don't think they're big games because they don't weigh into the national championship conversation, or the playoff conversation. But I am not just about that. I think, like Illinois, Purdue, for me, huge game. You're playing for a Big Ten championship spot, potentially. TCU, Texas, if I could only watch one game on Saturday, that would be my choice. North Carolina, Wake, that's a nice game. Interesting one there. And I just produced that video about college football playoff bubble teams, and North Carolina was there. Weakest resume, but still there. Florida State, Syracuse on the ACC network in primetime. And that's about it. The Pac-12 slate is pretty damn weak here. Cal, Oregon State, Stanford, Utah, Arizona, UCLA. Nothing really there in the Pac-12 other than Oregon and Washington. All right. Let's take a couple calls here. We got Sean on the line. Sean, how's it going tonight?
Fantastic. How's it going, Mark? Appreciate the AAC shout out for the UCF Tulane game.
Yeah.
Being a Cincinnati Bearcat fan myself, probably have to pull for the Green Wave in that one. Gives them the Bearcats a cleaner path to the American title game. But and winner of that league is almost certain to get one of those that New Year's Six bowl spot. So
do you know if Tulane and Cincinnati play this year?
Yes, they play the last weekend.
Oh, nice.
So it could be almost the same situation it was with Memphis a few years back.
Yeah,
where
back.
Yeah, but back to back. So, yeah, they play back to back weeks. So, yep. So, anyway, talked about a interesting conversation a minute ago with the previous caller about some of this conference expansion, and I listened to the Pac-12 show last night, and they were talking about what it sounds like is more likely to happen than not is they're going to add San Diego State and SMU.
Okay.
And I mean, judging from the from the markets and stuff, this move somewhat reminds me of the Big Ten's move with Maryland and Rutgers. You get two programs in that are in major media markets, and it sounds like a good idea, but these are not programs that people are conditioned to really care about that have large fan bases. And I don't know. I don't look at earnings reports or anything like that. I can't tell you exactly like what the Big Ten has gained by adding Maryland and Rutgers. But at least certainly from an aesthetic standpoint, for the Big Ten, they just seem like hangers on right now. It doesn't seem like they add a whole lot to the conference other than just sort of dilute the product a little bit.
Absolutely.
I mean, and you getting into these media markets sounds, I mean, I'm sure they get like larger, by just getting on more cable platforms and stuff, they get a larger cut of these, but I don't know. I've been to New York City. I've been to both New York City and Washington, D.C. Several times, and nobody cares about college sports in those towns, like generally at all. And they care about them a little more in Southern California and in Dallas. But I mean, SMU, how many SMU fans are there out there? How many?
Yeah.
Does that seem like an appropriate
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what struck me about the Big Ten move with Maryland and Rutgers was, yeah, they were going for media markets along the Beltway and New York City. And I moved to Connecticut in 2002 and listened to sports radio, and it's dominated by baseball talk at that point, but also, of course, the NFL, and then thirdly, the NBA. Yeah, there's no college football. There has to be a mammoth game for them to mention it, devote any time to it. And they're not talking about Rutgers. They're talking about the Ohio State Michigan game.
Yeah.
And I've even seen polls or statistics that have shown the interest of college football teams in New York, and it's all related to alumni and just tradition and big brands. And like the most popular college football teams in New York City are like Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State. It's not Rutgers. So absolutely. And I also think that deal was struck right at kind of the start of the transition to digital media and cable TV being less meaningful, less impactful. And the Big Ten made a move thinking cable homes, all these cable homes in New York City and in Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And the industry changed rather quickly in the next few years after that.
Tons and tons of cord cutting, right?
Yeah.
And it's so I mean, other than just to replace members in the league, is there much value in bringing San Diego State and SMU into the fold here? Because
I don't know if it's as much to bring the potential fans from those markets in as San Diego State and SMU fans as it is from bringing in Oregon or Washington or Arizona State fans that live in Dallas and live in San Diego to go to the game. I would think, and not that I know much about this, but the more I get into what I'm doing and trying to reach out to more people, I've talked to several people that say, for example, you want to get on Facebook and you want to target Ohio State fans, but not necessarily in Columbus. Like they have a large alumni base in Dallas and Orlando and LA. And so those other football brands, I was about to point to USC and UCLA, but of course they're going to be gone. Now, if they were still around, then I would think that there are a lot of possibly transplanted USC alumni that went to Dallas for career,
right? Well,
and so forth. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I would say certainly Ohio State and Michigan have a massive diaspora of fans across the country. I mean, you go anywhere, you'll probably see a Michigan shirt somewhere if you hang around long enough. And I mean, those are huge universities. I don't know how much the remaining programs really have as far as that. I mean, these are fairly regional universities, all the remaining ones outside of Stanford. And, Stanford has a relatively small student body anyway. But I mean, I don't know. That conference feels like it's treading water right now. And I guess it is. And it's sad to see in the midst of a strong resurgence on the field this season.
To your point, let's take an SMU. If they're averaging 25,000 fans a game, that's not even comparable to there being 110,000 in the Big House, because those people at the Big House are paying premium dollar.
Right.
And they're fighting to get tickets, and they could sell another 20,000 tickets. I bet out of that 25,000, there's all sorts of handouts and people paying $10, and they're basically just trying to get some people in the door. And then out of those 25,000 people, I wonder how many of them like consume SMU football, like in terms of read about it, watch the games if they don't go to the game, are really fans. Yeah, I don't know where that stands because we know that the Dallas Cowboys rule that area. And I got to think that the University of Texas has the most college fans for a college team. And then Texas A&M and probably even Oklahoma and who knows, Notre Dame and other schools way ahead of SMU.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a bunch of people, major universities, with transplants there. Yeah, SMU might be number 12 on that list. I mean, but TCU, at one point was basically the same thing as SMU, right? They were basically kind of at, they were rivals. They played each other every year for forever. And then Gary Patterson came in and elevated the football program to be and now they're a respectable member of a power conference now, right? I mean, it took a lot to get done, but it's not a joke that they're in the Big 12. So there is hope for SMU. They've
been there before as a
Southwest Conference.
Yeah, as a Southwest Conference, and so is Houston. They've been, well recognized top 25 type programs in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, just a couple things. This this weekend's games here. Do you agree? I find that Washington Oregon game to be. I think that's the one I'm kind of most excited for this weekend because I think that could be just a lot of fun. I just think that those two. I'm expecting a lot of points in that game.
Yeah,
and I think Washington has. I think the atmosphere is going to be insane in that game. Those two schools are just really don't like each other. That's one of the more understated rivalries. In all of football. I mean, right? They may have the in-state rivals that they play at the end of the year, but like, there's no question that they're each other's biggest rival.
Yes,
not even close.
Yeah. If somebody asked me that question without thinking about it, I'd say Washington State, Apple Cup, and then the Civil War with the other game. But yes, in talking to Oregon people and Washington people, they hate each other. They hate the other team, school, for whatever reason. Maybe I'll have to dig into that. I probably have in the past asked that question and had it explained to me why that bitterness has grown and been there through the ages between those two. I know that there are some theories and stories, and there's a background there. But Michael Penix, yes, will air it out. And Washington is not the Washington of the Chris Peterson era on defense. So they're not extremely good there, but they have capable offensive skill players. Wayne Talapapa, their best running back. And Oregon, not to discredit what Oregon's doing this year, but most people are thinking about them right now as one of the hottest teams in college football. They really haven't played anybody. They have a nice win against UCLA, and the second best team they've beaten is probably a 5-4 Washington State team.
Yeah.
But the next 4 weeks, they've got Washington, Utah, Oregon State, and then a Pac-12 championship game if they get through that of USC or UCLA, most likely.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting test. Yeah, I did notice that too. People assume that just when you haven't lost for a while, and the one time they got something of a national spotlight, they pretty much drubbed a pretty good UCLA team. So The perception with Oregon's probably different than the reality. I admit that, and that's why I expect this game to be much tighter and much more entertaining than a lot of people. An interesting thing about Washington and Oregon, now that I think about it, since I started watching football, they've both been kind of really good at different times. Like they've rarely been like, I mean, Washington was good in the 90s, early 2000s, and then Oregon showed up. Washington receded. Yeah, there have been a lot of one-sided games. But so interestingly enough, all right. Thanks a lot, Mark. I'm sure you got other people to get to talk to, so you have a good one.
Thanks, John. You too. All right. Welcome in, everyone, to the Voice of College Football. As I reach for my water. Yes, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much for your support. I see a lot of familiar names in here. We got John, we got Rob J, Roger Dodger, Ralph Wolf. A lot of good people in here. Thank you so much for being here. Mark R. Edwards as well. And we've got some good content that's been posted in the last few days, so check it out. We went through the 10 bubble teams that I see, and I'm really reviewed their resumes to date and what's upcoming and what's probable, and sized them up 1 through 10 in terms of where they stand right now and where they will probably stand at the end of the season. Also, just posted an LSU video with our guy Carter from LSU Power Hour, and a lot of other good stuff. Keep in mind that when you shop Amazon, please use the link that we provide in the description section. It would help us immensely. Just imagine if everybody that watches us on a regular basis would use the Amazon link, it would just go a long way in supporting the channel. So please use the Amazon link, put it somewhere where you will find it when you're doing your shopping, and it will come to mind. Patreon. We had One Scoop John in here earlier. Exploring with Ben's here. You can join those guys and everybody else, about 100 folks in Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. You join the Discord and go nuts. Those guys are doing streams. They're doing after show parties. They are talking it up all the time, college football all the time. $5 a month. You get my picks, which I'm not going to sell as anything great, but they're usually good. Bit of a down year this year, but we'll bounce back. Steve Merrill is 9-1. Steve Merrill joins us every Thursday from Wager Talk and gives us an exclusive under the radar selection. We post that on Patreon. He's 9-1 against the spread. All right, we got TriStar on the line. TriStar, how you doing tonight?
Good. How about you?
I'm good.
I was wondering, do you think North Carolina actually has a chance at a playoff?
I really don't. I think they should, but man, a lot of things would have to happen, and their schedule is so weak. They're playing, as you well know, the toughest portion of their schedule here in the next 4 weeks, going to the ACC championship game, and that doesn't even. I ranked the resumes of all the contenders that I consider to be on the bubble or could be on the bubble, and they're last. They're last. You know, their best win's Duke. Their second best win is Appalachian, probably Pitt. Pitt, then App State.
Yeah, Pitt.
Yeah, Pitt, then App State. Yeah, it's a really weak schedule, but they're going to have to go through Wake, which isn't looking like, the most formidable addition to their resume now with Wake falling off. But, NC State in a couple weeks, and then Clemson for an ACC championship game. So they would have to have so much
chaos
their way. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a normal year, they would still have difficulty, but in a normal year, even with their schedule going 12-1 in the ACC with the championship, they would have had a better shot in other years.
Well, they're not Clemson either. I feel like if Clemson had the exact same schedule and was 12-1, they would be more likely. Well, unfortunately.
I hate to think of it that way, but you're probably right. I would hope that this committee is doing their very best to try to avoid that kind of thought process.
Yeah, it's odd because I don't know. I feel like Clemson shouldn't even be in the top 10 anymore after that loss. I mean, personally, but
Yeah.
I guess the committee still has them in the top 10.
Yeah. Well, they're not playing like a top 10 team.
No. Okay, so I also wanted to get to this other thing. I'm a big Michigan fan, but like
Yeah.
the one thing that kind of irks me about Ohio State fans, this whole weather thing, and it happened like they're still complaining about last year's Michigan game, and now the Northwestern. I feel like they're already making excuses and like getting ready for November 26th. Got to make sure the weather's perfect. I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts about it.
Okay, here are my thoughts. That so I'm going to cut it in two different ways. The reality is that there are teams that rely more on passing the football than other teams, and therefore, obviously, ideal conditions help the passing attack as opposed to dealing with rain, with a wet ball, with wind, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
But the issue is that football is football, and the object of the game is to push the ball across the goal line and prevent the other team from pushing the ball across your goal line. So however way you fashion your team to do that, well, that's your problem. You know that you're going to play outside, and you play in Ohio, you play in the Big Ten, you can travel to Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota and everywhere else. So there's really no excuse for it. Are those factors? Yes. Is it a valid excuse? No, not at all. It's almost like injuries.
Sure.
Not every team has the same injuries. Some teams get hit with a lot of injuries. Some teams stay relatively healthy. Some teams get injured at the right time where they can kind of navigate a couple games. Some teams get injuries at the worst. Is that the truth, that it's not even? Absolutely, that's the truth. Is it an excuse, a valid? No, because you have a roster, you have backups. That's just part of the game. And that's the same thing here. Did Ohio State lose because of the weather? The answer to that question is, I don't know. But the real answer is, of course, no, because that should in no way be any kind of excuse. And I really don't believe they lost because of the weather. They got pushed all over the field. They got whipped. They didn't lose 30-27. And even if they did, it's football. So it's not an excuse. But yeah, that the weather hurt them in that game. But that's their fault. That they built a team that is somewhat affected by the weather more so than most teams.
And CJ Stroud did still throw for like 400 yards that game.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Passing the football was not their problem in that game.
Yeah.
The problem was Hassan Haskins in the offensive line for Michigan.
Sure. What was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say. Shoot.
You good with my answer?
Oh yeah. See, you're one of the more like, I don't know. I listen to so many people talk about sports. I listened to a couple of Ohio State podcasts and Michigan podcasts. You're one of the more people I like more so, because I feel like whenever I listen to Michigan people talk, they're way too like, oh, Michigan's gonna beat everybody, whatever, this and that, and then Ohio State people just like to rag on Michigan. I feel like you're more neutral, even though you are an Ohio State fan. So I appreciate that. Like I can actually listen to you.
I love Ohio State, and one thing that helps it is that I worked in the TV industry for 30 years, and when you watch that much sports, it's funny because we used to we were, I'm not going to go through what we were in charge of, but it was production operations, and there were actually people that would be working on games and their favorite team would be playing in the game, but they just wanted the game to be over. So, you get this kind of like professional mindset toward covering sports. And And the other thing is, yes, I love Ohio State. Now I'm not as fervent or passionate, or it doesn't hurt me nearly as much to watch them lose a game today as it did when I was 15 years old. It just doesn't. It's just a different time of life.
Sure.
So,
Mhm.
but I still want them to win every game, and I and all of that. But I think I can do a fairly good job of, I will admit, I will be very open and honest. If those two teams are playing in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks the way they're playing right now, I'm going to have difficulty picking that game, because when the season started, I thought Ohio State was better. But right now, I don't think they're better. I think Michigan's better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ohio State is way more talented, but I think the way they're playing right now, Michigan seems to be like their trajectory seems to be going up, where Ohio State's doesn't seem to as much. And it did seem odd that they weren't able to, weather aside, just push around Northwestern. I mean, Northwestern's terrible. So that was a bit odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The running game is not affected by the wind. You can make an excuse if the field was like slop, but the field was dry. It was fine. That there was no excuse for that. None.
And I know you guys didn't have Travion Henderson, but I mean, Mayan Williams is a very good back.
Yeah.
I don't know who the other running back you guys use. I don't know who your third string is, but
Alan Hayden.
Yeah, I mean, I still felt like you guys definitely still had way more talent than Northwestern. So
yeah.
All right.
All right, man.
Talk to you another time.
I appreciate it. Call back anytime.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Why don't we close it out with the guy that typically opens it up for us? So we will enjoy this as we always do. We had a good collection of callers tonight. It's going to be nice to hear from the SEC. We had all Ohio State and Michigan callers tonight. You know what? One of these nights we're going to get on here and I'm going to ban all Ohio State and Michigan callers for one night. I posted Big Ten and ACC power rankings. I try to get to all the conferences and I just don't have enough time to get to it. I posted the Big Ten and the ACC this week, and the Big Ten got 9,000 views, and the ACC got like 300 views. So I thought, my goodness, we need to bring other fan bases in here. And but the ACC one, I went and threw it on the Florida State and the Miami channels, and they got so many more views. So I guess that's why we got those team channels. Welcome into Real. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Mark. How about you?
I'm good.
Man, you were talking to that one caller about SMU and San Diego State potentially joining the Pac-12. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking in the back of my head with the 12-team expanded playoff. I mean, what team are we going to have left that's been consistently good in the group of five? Are we going to take Memphis every year? I mean,
yeah, the group of five is going to be watered down. Boise State?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we created a playoff system designed to help Cincinnati get in the playoffs, since they're better than most Power 5 teams, but can never quite make the top four, it felt like. Yep. But now, since they're leaving and all the good ones are leaving, we're just going to be stuck with a team that might be the 80th best team in the country.
Yeah. I don't know if Cincinnati, I guess their fans aren't going to be too happy with this. The administration, the reasons why programs join conferences, they're going to be fine because they're making all that Big 12 money. We were talking about them signing that new contract. So the university is going to be fine with their plight, but football fans are going to be frustrated because they're going to, let's say Cincinnati's finishing, 8-4, 9-3, going to, Alamo Bowls and so forth, and finishing unranked and then 22nd or whatever. And they're watching Tulane and Boise State go to playoffs every year, and they're better. But, you decided what you decided. So,
Yeah, I'm the more and more time that this playoff and with the teams moving, the more of a cataclysmic disaster I see this playoff structure being. But hey, I was the one. I've been saying sound the alarms, and all I want, Mark, and this is all I want, is everybody says they want the representation. That's fine. I just don't want to hear any complaints from anybody when if and most likely when the Final Four are all SEC and Big Ten teams. That's all I want. If you're happy with Oregon being in the playoffs, that's fine. But you also need to understand that they will probably lose to Tennessee by 30.
And you believe it's going to be cataclysmic in two ways. Number one is going to be that the SEC is going to be not necessarily overrepresented, but they're going to win the games that are going to filter into the Final 8 and the Final 4, and they're going to clog up and dominate the playoff. And number two, you really just think that group of 5 team is just going to get annihilated.
Yeah, and I mean
that 5-12 game, that Georgia that Georgia Tulane game when Georgia loses the SEC championship game.
Yeah, not only that game, but it would currently be TCU as the 5-4 game. Tennessee versus TCU, my goodness. TCU might beat them by 28 points. Like, they would just go up and down the field. I mean, TCU is a good football team. They are a quality top 20 football team, in my opinion. But Tennessee's just on a different level. If you're struggling against Texas Tech, Kansas State, and those type of teams, how are you going to compete? It's not like we're asking them to compete with Ole Miss. We're asking them to compete with the loser of the SEC or the loser of Ohio State, Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be something else to see how these filter down to a Final Four, and what the SEC and I just want the wild card teams, for lack of a better term, the at-large teams, just so they earn it, just so if the SEC gets more spots than anybody else, just so those teams earned it with non-conference wins, just so the SEC can prove to us each year that, we're earning those spots because we played, these 16 non-conference games and we won 11 and we beat all these really good teams from other conferences, just so it's not just a kind of a given.
Well, it may not be a given, but I'm pretty sure on the football field, we're going to see that it's going to be given over time because the perception and the gap is going to grow. But there's a comment I'm reading. How is Tennessee going to ask their secondary to guard those TCU wide receivers the same way they guarded Kentucky's wide receivers? As a Kentucky fan, I'm pretty sure Kentucky and TCU are about equal level teams, Mark, right?
Like, I'd say so.
And how did TCU do against Kentucky?
Yeah, that was up.
Kentucky did against Tennessee. And look what Tennessee did against LSU. LSU is a good football team. This idea that Tennessee's defense is just horrendous. Now, I know that's what they showed against Alabama, but Mark, Alabama's still a top 10 football team, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're still elite, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I did this idea that Tennessee wouldn't dominate TCU or their defense would struggle is something I don't get at all. I don't understand.
The TCU would stomp Kentucky. I don't think they would stomp them. I don't think they stomp anyone. They didn't stomp Kansas.
Right. Here's Kentucky's games they've lost, okay? They lost to Ole Miss by 3 points.
Yep.
Ole Miss has 1 loss. They lost to South Carolina without their starting quarterback.
Yep.
They got annihilated by Tennessee.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, it's possible Kentucky goes 8-4 and loses to 3 top 10 teams in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, are we saying that's a team that would get stomped by TCU? That makes no sense to me.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. It's just like how certain people get overestimate group of 5 teams because they're 12-1, but they're not 12-1 against a legitimate schedule. Now, a Big 12 schedule is legitimate, but yeah, it's just a different deal. It's just a different schedule.
Right. I mean, what's TC? I'm looking at TCU's schedule. They won by 8 against SMU, double overtime against Oklahoma State, Kansas State with their whole third string quarterback. West Virginia West Virginia was always in that game, and West Virginia is what, a 3-9 to 4-8 team.
Yeah.
TCU is a good story, but I don't think they're like Cincinnati last year. They're a great story, but everybody kind of knows, in my opinion, they aren't a top 10 football team. If they played every team in the country, they would not finish in the top 10.
So we're going to be fair here, of course. We're going to objectively look at this, and David brings up a good point that I've brought up in the past. Tennessee needed overtime to beat Pitt.
That's right, but that is an exception, not the rule. TCU, I just went through 5 games of theirs where they have had concern. Tennessee has shown time and time again that was the exception and not the rule. Every team has played bad at some point in the country. Even Georgia has played bad. Okay? Georgia played bad against Missouri. Georgia apparently played bad against Kent State. So every team has had that game where they struggle. Also, something else I've noticed with the bracket, if you're the 2 seed, if you were the 2 seed and if you lost the game, so that would be the Big Ten champion more than likely, and you knew you were going to be the 5 seed, you would almost rather lose the game than win the game, if that makes sense. Because the 5 path, in my opinion, is easier than the 2 path.
So if you're the 2, and then after the first round games are played, you're playing the 8, correct?
You would be playing the 7-10 matchup.
Okay.
So currently, based on the way the Patreon people have it, that would be the winner of Alabama USC.
Mm-hmm.
And the 5 seed would have to play the G5 and TCU. Which path is more difficult?
Yeah. The 2 seed.
Yeah, so we got a playoff system that's going to be implemented in the future, from what I've seen so far based on the voters, where the 2 seed is going to have a harder path than the 5 seed. The 5 seed is going to have the easiest path based on what I've seen, maybe even more than the 1 seed. The 5 seed might have the easiest path in the entire tournament to get to the semifinals. That's not a good thing. You could have an SEC championship game, and you would want your team to lose.
Do you remember what their seating looks like in the Patreon?
I will pull that up right now, Mark. Was that yesterday's video with the Pac-12 chat, or?
Well, they came on Tuesday night. So obviously Georgia's the 1. I think they had Michigan as the 2.
That's what I think.
And of course, the group of 5 is Tulane in the 12. The 5 would be Tennessee, I guess. Took them a while to get LSU into that thing.
Yeah, I know, Mark. It's clearly that SEC bias, struggling to find out. LSU,
I tried to tell them about LSU.
Laid it out, Mark. I'm not sure if you saw it, but Josh Pate laid out a scenario where if LSU loses both their SEC games and Alabama wins both of their games, Alabama's still alive.
Sure.
Alabama still has a chance to make the college football playoff.
LSU's losing to Arkansas and Texas A&M. Yeah, it's possible, but those teams are not playing well. But from a talent standpoint, yeah, they can lose.
Have you seen Arkansas? They're only, a 3.5-point underdog?
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, I've got it pulled up. So you got a list?
Yes.
Number 1 is Georgia. I know everybody's surprised. 2 is Michigan. 3 is Oregon. 4 is TCU.
Okay.
5 is Ohio State.
Oh, okay.
6 is Tennessee. 7 is USC. 8 is LSU. 9 is UCLA. 10 is Alabama. 11 is Clemson. And 12 is Tulane.
Okay. So Ohio State and Tulane. Okay. Tennessee, Clemson, USC, Bama, LSU, UCLA. So Ohio State's going to win. Tennessee's going to win. Bama's going to win. LSU's going to win. Okay. Then Georgia. So how are they
Georgia would play LSU.
Okay. The 1 and 8. Okay. Michigan plays Bama, right? Oregon plays Tennessee.
Yep, Oregon plays Tennessee, and Ohio State plays TCU.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. We're probably going to have, we could have 3 SEC teams in the Final Four. And had those matchups been differently, we could have all 4 SEC teams in the Final Four.
So based on the math you're doing right there, Mark, okay, what's more likely, 3 SEC teams making it this year with the 14 playoff, or 3 SEC teams making it with the 12-team playoff?
Well, it's higher with the 12-team playoff because I trust that the SEC is going to continue to win playoff games like it has for the last 8 years, as opposed to the committee selecting teams, selecting the 4.
I understand that, Mark, but the point I'm trying to make is when you have more, I think part of the reason people are wanting the 12-team playoff is to remove the SEC. They're tired of seeing the SEC on SEC logo. But I feel like this is more likely to make it happen.
Well, my reasoning for an expanded playoff is that I want to see every conference represented at least by one team, if not more, but at least by the champion of the conference. That's the reason I want to see it expanded.
Hey, that's fine. I just wanted to where if TCU loses to Ohio State by 35 points, I don't want to hear people complaining that the games aren't competitive or the playoff system is broken or anything like that. That's what I want. Because everybody's saying one expanded, the representation's great. Well, I don't know how great the representations be if the representation lost by 35 plus.
And I'm also going to make 2 points, and they're going to be on opposite sides. So I'm going to argue for each side here that in 8 years of the playoff, the SEC has received 10 playoff spots. 1 every year, and then 2 years they received 2. So 10 in 8 years, and the Pac-12 has received 2 in 8 years. So it's not been anywhere close to equal representation. But on the other side of that, it's clear to see year to year that those SEC teams at the top of the conference have won the non-conference games that have separated them so that they are chosen, as opposed to, for example, there were back-to-back years where the Pac-12 champion, the eventual Pac-12 champion, Oregon and Washington, lost to Auburn, who was a middle-tier SEC team. The Pac-12 champion eventually, later in the season, lost to Auburn, so they weren't selected to the playoff. So,
yeah, I understand that, Mark, and that's totally fine. The only thing I say is I think, and other people have the right to their opinion, but my side of the opinion is there's a certain region that cares more about the sport than others. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think that region needs the best representation. and we can't manufacture it to where other regions are as equal as that region. There's just certain things certain people care more about in life. It's just the way it is. You can't manufacture equity.
Yeah, and I don't know if that region of the country produces better football players because the region cares more, or the region cares more because they produce better football players. I don't know which came first.
Right, it's a chicken and the egg type of situation, but it is a continuous loop, and it's kind of feeding itself, and it's growing over time.
You're getting Ralph fired up because he says, "Yep, it's the Midwest."
Yeah, Mark, let me ask you this, guy. Outside of Ohio State, has there been a Midwest team that has won a Natty this millennium?
No.
Okay, and what about in the Southeast? How many of those programs have won a Natty this
Where are
millennium?
we? We're 22 years into this, right?
Yeah.
It's Ohio State 2, and it's the SEC, whatever, 14 or whatever the number is. Well, then you throw in Clemson. Yeah, it's what USC's won, depending on how you count, 1 or 2. And it's Ohio State with 2. And it's Oklahoma with 1. And the rest, Texas with 1. And the rest are in the Southeast.
I'm reading your comment section, Mark. There's a comment made that says that I don't get the fact that when your conference has 50% monopoly on 4 playoff spots, they will have a higher percentage of winning than the rest of the conferences. I mean, from a math standpoint, that is true. But even if you can account for that in the math, the SEC has still won more championships than they should have if it was all equity based, right?
So to answer that person, again, I will hit on the point that I just hit on. That's a valid, a semi-valid argument. Yes, the SEC has been given more opportunity than the other conferences. And at the extreme opposite ends of that point, the Pac-10, Pac-12 has received 2 college football playoff spots in 8 years, and the SEC has received 10. So the SEC has had so many more opportunities. However, the SEC teams have earned those opportunities by winning the difficult non-conference games. All you have to do is look it up year to year. And I cited 2 seasons in particular, 2018 and 2019. The Pac-12 champion, Washington in 2018, Oregon in 2019. They played an opening weekend game against Auburn, who went 7-5 both of those seasons. We're not talking about, it was almost the same example that we saw this season with Utah and Florida. And Auburn beat both of them. So the Pac-12 has not played well in those non-conference games. Therefore, when their champion has 2 losses, they're not going to get selected for the playoff. Now, in this new world, they will get selected for the playoff. They can lose all the non-conference games they want to against the better teams in the other conferences, and they'll still get selected for the playoff. But if they're not good enough to win those games in September, they're probably not good enough to win them in December.
Yeah, and what would it take for Alabama not to make the playoffs, Mark? With 12.
Yeah, well, we know that they were a different program before Saban, that they would have made it every year under Saban. It's similar to Ohio State. If you take out the Luke Fickell year, if there were a 12-team playoff, the last season Ohio State would not have made the playoff was 2004. They would have made the playoff 17 or 18 consecutive years.
Right. So from
same thing.
From a conference perspective, you're going to get more representation. But from a team perspective, I think you might actually get the same representation because the same faces are going to show up. Clemson's most likely going to be there. Alabama's most likely going to be there. Notre Dame most years. I know not this year, but most years. You're going to have Michigan be in there. So there's about 5 or 6 teams. I'm pretty sure every year we can pencil in and say they're in. And I just don't know how much fun that's going to be being like, well, Alabama's got 12 games just to prepare for the playoffs. I mean,
Well,
even with
we're
how
gonna have,
horrendous they played by.
and with this comment, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the next caller, and if he wants to join in on this conversation, Daryl, if you want to hang around, we can continue this conversation. But if he wants to talk about something completely different, then we will let you go. I'll just make this comment that I believe is just kind of extends on what you just said. Unless things drastically change in college football, Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and maybe Oklahoma, but the first four are going to continue just to make playoffs every year. With the 12 teams, they're going to be shoo-ins. So you're going to have 4 or 5 shoo-ins every year. And then the other 7 or 8 spots, well, minus the group of 5, is going to be kind of a collection of Penn State, maybe Wisconsin if they come back, Florida, LSU, I don't know, Florida State if they come back, and on and on and on. A collection of about 15 to 20 teams taking up those other 5 or 6 spots, Oregon, etc. That's what it's going to look like. All right, let's bring in, who do we have on the line? Hello?
Oh, hey, Mark.
Hey,
This is Mooley. Yeah, this is Mooley.
Mooly, appreciate you being here. So do you want to join the current conversation about the playoff, or did you want to join with something else?
I do if you want to, but I also understand if you want to move away from that.
No. I just wanted to do that since we want to focus on what you want to talk about.
Well, Mark, I grew up in the South. I grew up seeing Southern football, and I'm now living in Miami. Miami's still South, but it's not quite the same as like Louisiana or not. Also have came up to Chicago for the past week, which, by the way, I saw the conditions that the Northwestern game was. I guess I'm like 40 minutes away, but that's besides the point. Yes, SEC in terms of like the region, the Southeast. Yeah, we do care about football. I firmly believe we care about football the most. That being said, that doesn't mean there are other regions that don't care about football. Like, we know how much of a recruiting ground Southern California or Southern Florida is, Miami, or even the Midwest. Midwest does love football too. So I do think SEC is still the best conference, but it's not like it's leagues above the other conferences.
Yeah. My thing isn't that the other regions don't care. It's that one region cares more than the other regions.
Midwest cares about football, man. They care about their football. They care about their football in Midwest too, man.
Yeah, I know they do, but they should be rewarded more than other regions that don't care. And there's a few regions that I don't think care as much as the Southeast and the Midwest. And they're going to be rewarded with more playoff spots. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Do you think that's a bad thing?
Well, I will say this. You look at the SEC, especially the quarterback position. Where do most of their quarterbacks come from? California. Jaden Daniels, Bryce Young, the guy from Ole Miss last year. I'm blanking on his name. Even this year,
Matt Corral,
and the guy this year, I'm forgetting his name. Not Luke Altmaier.
Jackson Dart.
Yeah, Jackson Dart. Some regions produce a lot of good players. Or for example, take Wisconsin, for example. Everyone knows Wisconsin generally has big guys that historically they always have big, meaty O-line guys. And look at Midwest football. It's still old school, heavy defense, heavy run game. They played through snow and weather and stuff. And yeah, that's really all I got to say. But there's still a lot of great talent outside the Southeast. But I do agree it's the best region. It's just like we shouldn't just be like, oh, we're only going to look at these states. We're going to weigh these states more. No, we should look at resume because they're also people from Southeast. I know there are people from Southeast who say, oh, I get an offer for Oregon. I think I'll fit there. I'm going to go all the way to Oregon, or I'm going to go all the way to USC. I'm going to go to Texas is Austin. I mean, that's besides the point. Like,
Yeah,
I
I
hope
think there's players in different parts of the country that care, but I think the reason they go to the Southeast is that's because where the best coaches, the best players are already at, and that's where the fans are at. Like for the Pac-12, I know USC is all in on it football this year, but outside of them in Oregon and maybe Utah, what national
UCLA.
programs are west of Texas?
Okay, okay. I feel like we can just keep talking about this. Let me ask you this: Do you genuinely believe that TCU shouldn't be a top 4 team right now?
No, they should be a top 4 team right now.
Okay, I just don't, because I know that's what you're talking about. I kind of came in a little late, so I don't know like how this came to be.
The point I'm making is with the 12-team playoffs, it's going to add representation. It's going to artificially add representation. But the SEC, who is better than those teams, in my opinion, are going to absolutely destroy them on the football field. And in my opinion, what this is going to do is separate. We think of regionality between the SEC and everybody else as pretty big. I think it's going to grow with the 12-team playoffs because I think there's going to be multiple years where 3 out of the 4 semifinalists are from the SEC.
That could happen. That could definitely happen. And like, what have we seen from the 4-team playoff? A lot of SEC teams have been winning, whether it's LSU, Bama, Georgia. They come in the playoffs and destroy. But I will say, like, I'll just use this example. Let's just assume that right now Georgia is genuinely the best team in the country, and by a little bit of margin. By adding more games, there's still like a chance that they're more likely to mess up or not, because every team doesn't bring their A game every day. Sometimes there's scouting reports or whatnot, or like film studies or game plans that could, the most talented team doesn't always win. So let's say Georgia beats Ohio State 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 times. There's still a very good chance that Ohio State comes in and wins, or TCU, which, by the way, they seem to just keep coming back and stuff. I'll touch more on them, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that like some other team comes and beats some SEC teams, but SEC is going to be more likely because
yes.
Yeah, but see, that's my issue with that is where the goal at that point is not to find the best teams. It's to create artificial chaos. And I think the best example is March Madness. My Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats, they're not mine, but the Kentucky Wildcats lost to St. Peter. If they played 100 times, St. Peter's wins what, 1 or 2 of those games? But that doesn't matter. So the thing we're trying to do is we're trying to artificially create chaos. I want to find the best teams.
No, we've got a sport that has 5 major conferences and we've got 4 spots.
I feel like if Pac-12, if every conference started getting teams in the playoffs, even if they lose in the first round every year, they're going to be satisfied, maybe not fully satisfied, but they're going to say, okay, well, at least we're not, just being left out every year because our conference isn't looked at the same level, But
well, maybe that's where I just disagree with you because I think TCU, at least from my perspective, I would rather win a New Year's 6 bowl game than get absolutely throttled by a top 4 team.
Okay.
I mean, I know bowl games are kind of irrelevant or whatnot, but I like, as a Kentucky fan, seeing my team win the Citrus Bowl in a close game, seeing them win the Belk Bowl or the Music City Bowl. That's fun. But when your team's not even competitive and you just have nothing to watch, I mean, if by halftime it's 24-0 and your team has no realistic shot of a comeback, I mean, that just isn't fun to me to watch. I want to see close, competitive games.
True. Yeah, okay. I mean, I have nothing more to add to this. I think we talked about this enough.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck to TCU and every other team's, Mark. I think I should get going. I think I brought enough SEC talk in there. I heard all the StreamYard people light up. I mean, you just bring up those 3 letters and everybody goes crazy, it seems like nowadays, Mark.
Well, a lot of people are butthurt because when people say SEC is the best conference and they get butthurt over that, and then they try to create this artificial bias and stuff. And I mean, I've addressed it so many times on Twitter to the point where I don't even want to talk about it. But
Oh, don't worry. There was a guy yesterday I was talking to who was trying to explain to me, I think he was trying to explain to me that Utah is better than Kentucky because Kentucky looked worse again, or Florida's better than Kentucky because Kentucky looked worse against Tennessee than Florida did against Tennessee,
yeah,
despite the fact they played head-to-head and Kentucky won. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, good luck to your all's teams.
Thanks, man. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I'll put it down this way. In a more perfect world of college football, I think we would go back to the 1980s, let's say. We used to pick up Athlon, Street and Smith, all those major magazines in the preseason. And if I would go collect vintage Street and Smith's, Athlon's, all the major publications from the 1980s, and look at their top 15 to 25s, you would see all sorts of different, between the magazines, you would see different teams in different spots by large margins. And then also we would see from year to year, different teams. There were so many more teams in play that were competitive across the nation. If you look at the Big Ten, for example, during the 1980s, Ohio State and Michigan, of course, won their share of Big Ten championships in the 1980s, but Illinois won Big Ten championships, Michigan State, Iowa. There was just more representation across the board. You know, we could name so many teams that during the 1980s and 90s were at some point elite. Colorado was elite at one point for a 3 or 4 year stretch. And Washington. And again, on and on and on and on. We could go through, for whatever the reason, for whatever the case, there's been 4 or 5 programs that have really lasered in on football and have dominated in the last 10 years. And then there's another few programs that are capable of doing such. When it comes to the SEC, I truly believe that from the time I started watching football in the late 70s up until about 15 years ago, that there were ebbs and flows to best conference. The SEC was not the best conference in the 1980s. 1990s, maybe at times, but there was a great debate every year over the best conference, and it was almost never clear cut. It was always a debate between the 5 major conferences, or at that time you had the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC. The ACC was never the best conference. There was no Florida State until 1992, and even after Florida State joined, they just owned the conference the most of the time. The ACC was an afterthought, but the Pac-10 was extremely good. And of course, you had the Southwest Conference, and you had the Big 8 that became the Big 12. And again, there was no monopoly on college football. And for some reason, sometime in the mid-2000s, meaning 05, in that range, right around the time that the SEC, in fact, did start winning national championships every year. And that's not the reason I'm making that evaluation. I don't believe that just because a conference wins a national championship, that's the best conference. No. I'm going by the complete results on the field, top to bottom in the conference. The SEC over the last 15 years has been the best conference. Now, sometimes it's been close. Sometimes the Big 10 or a Big 12 has jumped up. It's been a long time since the Pac-12 was any kind of factor. The Pac-12 was actually at the outset of the college football playoff when Oregon was extremely good. when Stanford was extremely good, there was a little window of time that the Pac-12 was pretty respectable there. And they're possibly getting back to that, although USC and UCLA are going to leave in 2 years. I would love, believe me, I would love more than anything to have a debate, especially once we hit the off season. What I used to do during the off season is I would take the results of all the non-conference games. And I wouldn't just say, well, the Big Ten went 10-7 and the SEC went 12-5, so they're better, and the ACC went 5-12, so they suck. No, because of the matchups, it needs to be a deeper dive than that. So I would seed based on standings, all the conferences, I would seed them, and then I would say, okay, the 1 seed from the Big 12 beat the 8 seed from the ACC. Well, the Big 12 should be given credit for that, but not much credit. So I had a complete mathematical system that gave weight to each seeding, and I would deliver a kind of a report on the college football season and what the regular season non-conference games, the bowl games, and the playoff games, put those all together as non-conference games between the Power Five. And I would give a little report card to say, hey, these are the records, but then let's weight the games based on seedings. And these are the conference rankings. I didn't do that last year. I didn't do that the year before because it was like, why? And I know people that hate the SEC don't want to hear this, but it's the best conference. Now, I do believe that there have been many times by many college football analysts, commentators, pundits out there that have way overvalued the SEC and made excuses for the SEC when the SEC has lost bowl games. That the SEC, when the SEC loses a bowl game, well, it doesn't care. That team didn't care. But the SEC has performed the best, even if you take out the NFL draft selections and the recruiting rankings. Forget those. Even though those are great indicators and they've proven true, they've proven to be reality, get rid of them because all that matters are the results on the field. The SEC has just played the best. They have the best record against the best teams. Look at this season. Go to all the conferences and just make a list of who each one of that conference has defeated, all the wins for that conference. Just make a list. SEC, what do we have? We've got Texas, we've got Oregon, Memphis, Pitt, Cincinnati, Georgia Tech. Just go through the wins and the losses. And do that for every conference. The ACC. The ACC beat LSU. UCF. App State. There's a few other out there. Texas Tech. Just do that sometime. And that doesn't prove everything. That's a pretty good indicator every year. The non-conference wins and losses for every conference. The Big Ten. Got a lot of Big Ten fans here. You don't want to hear it, but I don't like to hear it. Big Ten's got really one legitimate win out of conference this year, and that's Notre Dame. Ohio State beat Notre Dame. Okay, well, Rutgers beat BC in week 1. At the time, I thought, well, that's a really good win for the Big Ten because Rutgers is going to be maybe the worst team in the Big Ten, one of the 3 worst. And Boston College is supposed to be this year going to be like an 8-4 team. That was a great win. Well, didn't turn out that way. Boston College is awful. But the Big Ten did win the game between their awful team and the ACC's awful team. But Iowa lost to Iowa State. And Wisconsin lost to Washington State, and Michigan State lost to Washington, and Northwestern lost to Duke. The Big Ten's Power 5 wins are Notre Dame, Boston College, Auburn, Virginia. I think there's one more in there. Colorado. It's not impressive. It's not impressive. I will lay it all out after, if I've got time, because we're going to be focused on conference championship games and the playoff and all that and the bowl game release. But if I've got time, I'm going to recalculate. I released conference rankings around the last weekend of September because that was right about the time that most of the non-conference games had been played, and we could size up the conferences. But we're going to have that weekend of ACC versus SEC, the final weekend, those 4 games. So I'll add those in, and I'll either produce a video there or we'll wait till the entire season's over. We'll go through regular season, bowl season, playoffs, and add up all the conference standings. And who knows, maybe somebody will knock off the SEC as being the best conference on the field. I have no doubt that the SEC is the best conference, but it may not prove that on the field. And that's what counts. That's what matters. All right. Our man, Uncle Rico, has a super chat I would like to catch up with. And we do have Tiger Paw coming in here as our last caller. Uncle Rico says, as long as all the top high school talent is in the South, the SEC will remain the dominant conference with just a handful of outside programs able to compete. And just one note on that, it is pretty well held up that 40% of the top 300 players in the nation have come from Florida, Texas, and California. Okay. Well, California's slipping in the recruiting, still extremely talented, loaded with talent, but Georgia going up the rankings very high, and has basically caught California. So now you could displace California and say Georgia between Georgia, Florida, and Texas. And those are all what? SEC footprint. All right. Got Tiger Paw coming on here to talk some football.
Hey, what's up, Mark? How you doing?
Man, what's going on?
Just living the dream. We just got done with the Clemson Tiger and Louisville preview
I was telling
with
folks
me
to
and
get over
Jordan
there.
Bowman. So it was good things on the Clemson channel, and I figured I'd pop over to your channel, talk a little college football. I see some people in the chat love Clemson, and they say Clemson sucks. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, appreciate that, man.
They did last week.
Yeah, they did. They absolutely did last week. We earned that. We 100% earned the Clemson sucks mantra last week. That's for sure. Notre Dame lined up, and they absolutely gut checked Clemson, and they weren't ready for it on the offensive or defensive lines of the ball. I think Clemson came in undercoached. They came in underprepared. I think Clemson's offensive scheme is getting stale, and it needs an overhaul in the offseason. Dabo Swinney's going to have a lot of tough decisions come this offseason. That's what I think. Now, Clemson still got a lot of things ahead of them this season. They basically already made it to the ACC championship this season, but they can sure up a no doubt bid, I guess, if they beat Louisville this week. And, they're going to the ACC championship regardless. We can win the ACC. We can go to a New Year's Six Bowl, and we can have a good win there. But that does not negate the fact that there are some serious questions for Clemson football to answer this offseason. And I think Dabo Swinney has his work cut out for him. I know there's been a lot of talk about with every fan base, Mark. I'm sure you've seen it in a lot. Yeah, you deal with a lot of fan bases here on YouTube. So there's a lot of, if you will, sunshine pumpers, if you will, with fan bases. And, you can't criticize a coach. You can't criticize a program because of yada, yada. We used to be this bad and now we're this good, so we can't complain. I don't buy into that at all, Mark. I'm sure if you've seen any of the stuff that you have graciously trusted me to do on your channel, on the Clemson channel, I don't buy into that at all. Look, every coach can be criticized. Every team can be criticized. And when you elevate to a certain standard, you should be held to that standard.
Yeah.
Without question. And I think that's where Clemson is. I know they don't like it. It doesn't feel good when you're held to this high standard and you're not really achieving that standard. But at the same time, we're not looking to lower our standard just because you may have hired some ill-equipped coaches to meet that standard, if you will. What's your thoughts?
Well, the comment that you just made about the standard reminds me of when Mark Richt and Les Miles were fired, and people asked me, should they have been fired? Aren't they winning a lot of games? And I said,
Sure.
well, yeah, if they're being held to a standard of, are you good at your job? Are you good at your job? You're an accountant, you're a post office worker, and do you come in and do your job? Well, you're being paid a certain amount of money that's pretty moderate just to do a decent job. And as long as you keep your nose clean and do your job, you're going to keep your job. But these guys, so are these guys good football coaches that know how to run football programs? Yeah, they do.
Sure.
But they were being paid top 5 money in the sport.
Yeah.
So they were being paid to compete. And the downside to that is, well, I get paid unlike almost anybody in America, but I got to maintain a standard that is competing for national championships. And as long as if that's not met after 2 or 3 or 4 years, then bye, you're not meeting the standard of the contract. And so I see the same thing at Clemson, and I'm not in any way saying Dabo Swinney should be fired by any stretch.
Neither am I. So calm down, Clemson fans. If you think I'm saying Dabo Swinney should be fired, I'm not. Chill out. But
what I find interesting about the Clemson situation, and maybe you can give me some insight into this, and I watch Clemson. I watch them play quite a bit, not nearly as much as you, but I saw the NC State game, the Florida State game, the Syracuse game, some of the Wake game, Georgia Tech game, since obviously nobody else was playing. So would you agree during the championship run that there were no weak units on either side of the ball, but if there was a weaker unit, it was probably the offensive line? Was less recruited, not at the
absolutely. Like at least through the if you will, the national championship runs that Clemson had, those 4 in a row that they appeared in. That was definitely the weakest, I think, position group, if you will, for Clemson, and the least recruited as far as Clemson football goes. But they were adequate because of all the talent around them, right?
Yeah, you can't win a national championship with a weak offensive line, but they weren't
weak compared to a lot of the offensive lines around the country. Yes. They would have probably been the weakest of the Final 4 offensive linemen or offensive line groups for the teams.
So what I noticed with the decline on the offensive side of the ball the last few years was obviously everybody points at DJ. And certainly DJ is not Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence.
No.
Almost called him Dexter Lawrence, Trevor Lawrence. So that's obvious. But of course, the quarterback's the easy target, and that's the one everybody jumps on. And then you've got a lot of people that comment that don't even watch the games because they're watching their team play, but they know, oh, Clemson can't score. The quarterback sucks. And again, he didn't play well last year, but the offensive line was in pass protection was lousy a lot of the time. And the other thing that perplexes me about Clemson is this is a program that for about 10 years produced as good a wide receiver room as anybody in the country. We could go
Wide
down
receiver you.
Yes, we could
Wide
go down the
receiver
list
you.
of dudes that have
Yes.
just been phenomenal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could name all the guys, but everybody in the comment section and that pays attention to college
Yes.
football, they already know the names.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So what I did not see, and it's kind of started to slip the last couple of years and then really hit last year, was watching these Clemson wide receivers, and I'm thinking, I know these guys. I know when they were recruited and signed, they were supposed to be excellent guys to be that next wave of wide receivers, but I'm not seeing them separate. I'm not seeing them just flat out catch the ball half the time. I'm not seeing them high point the football, not seeing them able to outfight defensive backs for the ball. It's like if I'm not wide open and the ball's not thrown right to me, then I'm not catching the ball like DeAndre Hopkins or Martavis Bryant or one of those dudes.
Look, Mark, you are preaching to the choir here. I don't understand it. I don't know what has I don't know if Clemson just magically started recruiting the wrong guys, or we started underdeveloping guys. Because at the end of the day, you can look at there was a distinct turn in Clemson football. If you're really paying attention and you've really been following Clemson football for long enough, when Jeff Scott transitioned to South Florida as the head coach, there was a turn in Clemson football on the offensive side of the ball and in the wide receiver room. Okay, there was a turn if you were really paying attention to Clemson football. Was it a recruiting problem where Jeff Scott was just really that dude in the recruiting side of the ball? I don't know. But there's clearly not that elite receiver group that we're used to in Clemson football, right? There's not the Sammy Watkins. There's not the DeAndre Hopkins. There's not the T. Higgins. There's not the Mike Williams. There's not the Jordan Leggett. There's not those dudes in the receiving room for Clemson anymore. There's not those guys that are aggressive. To your point, Mark, there's not those guys that are out there really going to get the ball, not letting the ball come to them, but really going to get the ball, making what I call it is making the quarterback right, even when he's wrong, right? Isn't that a receiver's job? Like an elite 5-star receiver, they make a quarterback right. They make a quarterback look good. And that's not Clemson's receiver room right now. We have a couple guys, right? But Bo Collins recently separated his shoulder. He's out for at least a couple weeks. Ngata hasn't really ever come into his own. Everybody knows Latson that kind of went to he transferred to Florida. He never really came into his own at Clemson. Is that part of coaching and kind of an underdevelopment thing, or is that a recruitment thing? We don't really know. It's yet to be seen. There's a really young coaching staff in Clemson right now. Are they capable of producing the type of talent that Clemson is used to? And is it a coaching issue or is it a recruiting issue? It could be a little bit of both. I'm not exactly sure. But if I had to guess, it's probably both. But more so, I think it's more so on the coaches, because Clemson is still recruiting at a super high level. Okay?
Yep.
And you better get right before the tide starts turning against you. Because once that tide starts turning against you and you start losing those top level recruits, that's really hard to get back. As a program, it's really hard to get back those top level recruits once you start losing them. So Dabo Swinney has to wake up this offseason. He has to look himself in the mirror And I'm not saying Dabo Swinney is no longer the answer. I'm not saying he didn't win 2 national titles for Clemson. I'm not saying he's not the greatest thing that happened to Clemson, because I believe he does. He is, and he has been. But with that said, what I will say about Clemson football is that he needs to look into the mirror and he needs to really evaluate his coaching staff and his philosophy on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball and decide whether that is the best direction for Clemson football going forward. And if it's not, he is paid a whole lot of money to make those difficult decisions.
Tiger Paw, we are closing up shop tonight. I appreciate you stopping by and laying down the law on Clemson football. And again,
Thank you.
everybody that was here and not over there, we were letting people know that they could jump on over to the Clemson channel and check out your work. But everybody, you can check out to the record now that's posted on the Clemson Louisville preview over on the Clemson channel. And then catch Tiger Paw here and the guys for Clemson postgame after the ball game.
Yeah, we will be here immediately following the Clemson game, probably around 7-ish, depending on when the game ends. Game against Louisville starts at 3:30 on ESPN. So come join us for the post-game reaction. You can come talk crap to us. You can come laugh at us if we lose, or you can come rejoice if we win. It'll all depend on what Clemson team shows up. And Mark, thank you for lending your channel to us on the Clemson channel. We enjoy bringing the live shows that we do and the panel that I bring to the Clemson channel. And everybody subscribe. Look, hey, go to the Clemson channel right now. If you are on this channel right now, look, we are looking to get to 4,000 subscribers on the Clemson channel by the end of this season, okay? We are super close, guys. We are super close to 4,000 subscribers on the Clemson channel. We want to be to it by the end of November, okay? So by the end of the regular season, my panel is looking to get the Clemson channel to 4,000 subscribers, okay? So please help us out. Hit the like button. Share our videos. We try to work hard in bringing you guys the best content that we possibly can. And Mark, thank you for lending your channel to us.
Tiger Paw, we all know how lazy people are, me included. So I just grabbed the link. I put it in the chat.
Hey.
So the link's right there in the chat to the Clemson channel.
Mark. Thank you,
Tiger
Mark.
Paw, thank you so much for what you guys are doing, Smitty and Jordan and DeAndre, all you guys that get together to knock out the Clemson post game. And then you came with the preview shows, and that was phenomenal. So thank you so much for doing
We're on the road to 4,000, Mark. We're going to get there before anybody else. And Tiger Paw out. Look for Clemson winning this game against Louisville, I hope. And I'll be back on next week, Mark. Thank you.
Awesome. We appreciate you. We'll let everybody out there know that we're closing up shop for the night. We'll be back on Friday night. Let's see. We've got our West Virginia live show at 8 p.m. Eastern time right here. And also we'll lead you into the USC-Colorado game that we're all waiting for. That's our Friday night game. All right, folks, we appreciate it. Uncle Rico and others, thank you so much for all that you do. Thanks for being here. And we will see you Friday night.